to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. We could have roll.
Mayor Lippers,
I'm here.
Vice Mayor Wiest,
Here.
Councilmember Lewis,
Here.
Councilmember Whitmer, Councilmember DeGolia.
Here. So all present?
All present.
All right. We're starting out the evening. We do have some presentations. Is that correct? Chief?
We do. Good morning. Or good morning. Hello, Mayor.
I got started. Sorry.
You caused that. Yes, we do. This is absolutely one of the most fun part and important parts of my job is to, first off, be able to hire new officers, but then get them going in training and promote a sergeant. So I'd ask Sergeant Vigil to come up front, please. Oh. And the family, good. Good morning. And I'll have Officer Dutta come up as well. We'll do the swearing in. I'll do 2 for 1. So the execution of this oath is required by Article XX, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of California. So you would say, raise your right arm. I state your name.
I, Chris Vigil,
I, Gina Dutta,
Do solemnly affirm that I will support
do solemnly affirm that I will support
and defend the Constitution of the United States
and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California against all enemies,
and the Constitution of California against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of California,
Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
discharge the duties
of which I'm about to enter.
about to enter.
Can you have your wife come up? I think she's here, correct?
She's here.
So it is with great pleasure that we welcome back Sergeant Vigil. Those of you know he was with Atherton Police for 2 years. Before he decided to go, which I think was probably a mistake, for the last 3 years, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office, where his duties included FTO, peer support, honor guard. He comes back to us with a lot of experience, and it's really a pleasure to have him back. He's jumped right in, as you can imagine, as the head of one of our patrol squads. He's married to his wife Felicia, 3-month-old daughter Ava, and they have a teenage son somewhere named Dylan.
Yes.
Correct? Probably doing homework.
He's having his birthday party right
Excellent. Sergeant Vigil holds a bachelor's degree and is currently working on his master's degree. So we're just really happy to have him back in the Atherton Department of Police family. So congratulations. We almost forgot the badge. And a kiss. Now we have Officer Dutta will come back up. And is your husband here?
Yes.
So Officer Dutta began her field training program with us on July 31st. She was born in the Fijian Islands, and she's bilingual in Hindi and currently married to her husband Sanji, who is an attorney locally. She has her master's degree in public administration. These people are making me feel bad. And completed her police academy training at Santa Rosa Public Training Center. Her past employment was with the Attorney General Department of Justice in San Francisco as an associate government program analyst. Sounds very important. Her FTO program will last about 4 months, about Christmas time. Great present. We'll have another officer on the street. And she's been doing outstanding so far. Very personal, very professional, and we're very happy to have her on board.
Right.
And the requisite kiss. And I made sure that she was getting taken to dinner tonight by her husband, which she said that she was. So.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, proclamation. The start of October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so Officer Pronsky, if you come up, and I believe you saw some of that information that went out. We just wanted to demonstrate what the pink patch looks like, and our officers will be authorized to wear that during the month of October, or any other pink attire in recognition. We'll be one of, I think, over 200 agencies across the country participating in this important event, and you may or not be aware that we've had several members that have been personally touched by that, as I have with my family, so it is a great cause, and we'll be proud to be wearing pink during the month of October.
Awesome.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you very
One
much.
last thing, Officer Matt Barrera unfortunately has made a mistake and is going to another city. Matt has been with us for 2 years, prior to that with San Jose. He brought a lot of experience from San Jose to us, serves on the regional SWAT team. He's going on to Redwood City, tomorrow is his last shift. Hopefully, like Sergeant Vision, we'll see him back here in a couple years. But we wish him well in Redwood City, and being just next door, we'll still be working with him. So I think that's
Thank you
it.
for your service.
Okay. Mostly happy occasion there. We are on public comments. So if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on any item that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to comment on it. Okay, seeing none, pull it back, and we'll go to, there was no closed session, so there's no report out of it, is that correct? Moving on to the city manager, folks. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have a written staff report before you, which actually includes information from both July and August, yes. There is one item that I need some feedback from the council on. At the October 4th study session meeting, which typically begins at 4 o'clock, the Park and Rec Committee has moved their meeting up by an hour. So our council member liaison, Councilmember DeGolia, has requested that the council consider moving the council meeting back as well from 3 to 5 instead of 4 to 6 for consideration. So if there's any feedback on that, I'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, move it back, move it up. Up or back? Move it up. Move it up. Okay. Move it up.
So would this be a permanent? Just one time?
I gotta say, I have a difficult time making it back by 3 o'clock. I work in San Francisco. So it's possible that I could make it work, but I can't do it this time.
And for me, I love it because on that October meeting is the roundtable meeting that starts at 7. And it's going to be a very big roundtable meeting. And so it gives me a little bit more reading room to get up there. So I'm for it.
Let me check. I thought we made a deal about these things, and part of it was people with full-time work in San Francisco. Yeah, I'll try to make it work, but right now I can't commit to it. Okay.
We did make a deal. We said we would move people. That's what you asked.
I'm available at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, when we agreed to it before, I said that twice a year the Park and Rec Committee starts at 5.
Yeah.
And they do that because it's a longer meeting.
Okay.
So that was on notice.
Then maybe, and it's just, we're
Dial-
getting more.
dial in, Mike.
I'll just leave it for.
No, let me see if I can make it work. I'm just making the point that
Maybe all of that.
maybe
For the first hour.
for the first hour, it's,
Or
thanks for raising this in public, Mr. City Manager. It's not the time to do it. It actually should have been done this way. Thank you very much.
Couldn't really on that.
So, short answer is, I don't know. I will find it very difficult to move my calendar moving forward. I will try to do that. If need be, in the future, I would rather not have this raised in a public session. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the city manager report. One of the items on the report concerns transparency standards for, this is page 4 of 6.
Okay.
Item number 11, where the county grand jury issued a report titled "We Can See You Now," where it
Can we see?
engaged in an analysis of the special district's website transparency, and the city manager's report reports on the mosquito abatement district, and I'm interested to know what their assessment was of the other special districts that are
We can get a copy of that report and I can share it.
great.
Distribute that out.
spreadsheet that Robert is putting together on cash flow projections through the next fiscal year, or no, the current fiscal year, and in order to give us some guidance regarding our commitments to fund the Civic Center. And we don't have that report yet, but the conclusion is that there will be sufficient cash flow to meet the commitments that we've got. And my question was, it doesn't say it, but I assume that this assumes the continuation of the parcel tax.
Yes, it assumes a continuation of the parcel tax, and we have the cash projected out to meet the needs of the Civic Center project. It's just how that, because we only get paid property taxes twice a year, how it'll hit our coffers.
So we're looking forward to
It's a
that.
timing issue.
It's a cash flow timing issue as opposed to the funds, that we projected funds. Right. Timing versus cash.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I believe no, any community organization roundtable report? No. Move on to consent calendar. I believe, I see Mr. Safai in the audience, and it would be pulling item 11 for discussion in the regular order. So that would leave items 8 through 21 except. Anyone else have any items they'd like to pull?
I move for approval of.
Let me actually reach out to the members of the audience real quick. See if anybody in the audience would like to pull any items in the consent calendar. Okay, seeing none, I'll turn to Mr. Wood.
Move that we approve the consent calendar except for number 11, which would be
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Okay, pass.
Can we take up 11 now?
Yeah.
Mr. Safai can.
That makes sense. I think one vote, you want to introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have a written staff report. This was an item that was on your agenda back in June. Mr. Safai approached the council and asked if it could be continued. Your next meeting was the September meeting. I'm sorry, July. But your next meeting was the September meeting. So that's why it's on your agenda tonight. Mr. Safai has provided some additional information which is included in your packet. Staff's perspective is the fees were paid for plan check services, both for building and planning. Services were rendered for those plan check fees for the plan that was under review. And then Mr. Safai pulled that application, withdrew it, and at that point, there's no refund available as those fees are non-refundable. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for allowing me to talk with you about this matter. My name is Cyrus Safai. I'm a resident of Atherton, and my address is 37 Irving Avenue. I have submitted to you 30-page petition for $545 that I request refund. Why it was worth it for me to come before you for that amount of money and spend so much time of yours, as well as 30 pages is not easy to prepare, but I did. Now, in addition to that 30 pages that I'm not going to go through it because it's before you, and I hope that has come to your attention, there are 2 other pages added by the staff. The staff recommends you to deny this petition. Now, a staff report states that on October 31, 2016, I paid $440.27 fee to obtain a permit. Not true. I paid $605.45. And I have attached an exhibit to come to your attention that registered by the town of Atherton and accepted my payment, and they received it. So I don't know why they are claiming that I did not pay. Now, there is a fee schedule which is authorized by the city council and confirms that the planning fee for creating or structuring a fence is $160. I have attached an exhibit, and that fee schedule is approved by city council. Therefore, it should be followed. Now, why they charge me $605.45? This question has been with me for the past 6 months, and I've had many communications with them. A staff report that the claimant damages asking for $484.36. Not true. I'm asking for $568.27. A staff report states that the planning department performed 2 plan checks. Oddly, before you, there is none. There is nothing attached because it doesn't exist. Simply, there is a claim that they did checks. Perhaps it's imaginary, and I don't know. But I have not seen it. They have not sent it to me. They have not sent to you, and they have not put it in front of you tonight that you could see what they did. I here allege that they did nothing, and they charged for services. I understand my 3 minutes is getting to the end, and I have to shortly stop. My claim.
Actually, Mr. Stiles, normally people are limited to 3 minutes. Let me give you another 3 minutes.
I appreciate that. Sincerely, thank you. Now, my claim is based on my rights under California Consumer Legal Remedy Act, CLARA, Civil Code Section 1770 SEC, and also government codes that clearly states that for services like this, a reasonable fee must be charged to the residents, not whatever the city manager or planning department desire to charge. There is no record any place that $440 was appropriately taken from me. Now, you may say that, let this go while you are here. I was here in 2007. Planning department was doing the same gimmick. Residents were mad. I was mad too. So the matter ended up to the Superior Court and actually was investigated there. They found that the city at that time was doing wrong. Here there is a wrong done. I'm not really here to get the money from the city. I just want them to follow the law. That's all. Now, I'm asking you to award me that amount, but I would have also the right to contribute it back to the city for building of a new building for us. But I do not want they get away by charging me for services that they did not render. Any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Just to follow up, I know the city attorney has a comment or two that he would like to make regarding the building code component at the item. With respect to the planning review process, there is a letter that Mr. Safai has included, it's Exhibit B, that says the planning department has reviewed and conditionally approved the above with the following conditions. And that was the notice of correction sent after planning staff had conducted their review. So turn it over to the city attorney for his comments if appropriate.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I apologize for not having an earlier review of all these documents. They seem to filter in today at a rapid rate. And here's the problem. The $600 is correct. It was $600, and it's shown that on their cash receipt from the building department. It's in Patrick. The refund is 80% of the building permit fee, not the fee for the plan review, which did take place. And once the money is given to the planning department, and they start with the building department, and they start with the building code review, that money's gone. And it's usually passed through to somebody, although it can be done in-house. That money was spent, and it's not refundable ever to anyone. We do not do that. The building permit fee, which was the minor part of that, I think it shows on there, I believe it was $165. That 80% of that could be refundable.
That was the plan check.
Yes, excuse me, yes. But more importantly, I believe everybody received today a follow-up from George regarding the town's refund and how it originates. Well, it starts off with the building official may authorize, and if he can authorize a refund if it was erroneously paid or collected. There's no evidence that that occurred. B, the official may authorize refunding of 80% of the plan review fee when an application for a PIN permit has been paid, is withdrawn, or canceled before any plan review is done. That, unfortunately, in this case, is not the case here. The review was done, so they can't refund if they wanted to. C, the building official may authorize refunding of 80% when no work has been done under a permit issue. That's not the case here. No building permit was ever issued. The building official shall not authorize the refunding of any fee paid except upon a written application filed by the original permittee not later than 180 days after the date of fee payment. Unfortunately, the request for a refund was after the 180-day statute of limitations had run. He's time barred. The city council has no jurisdiction to give him his money back if you wanted to, because the statute of limitations has simply expired, and at this point, there's a real good argument it would be a gift of public funds because there's no statute that authorizes any refund at this point. I sympathize with the applicant. It is a confusing area, but I believe that the way that this has happened, it's problematic at this point.
Respectfully,
One moment,
I just want to ask the city attorney one thing, because his exhibit C indicates that the permit, when he filled out his request for a refund, permit cancellation, he said that his permit fee was paid October 31st, 2016, and he filed this in April 14th, 2017. I'm just going to do my little hand counting of, it is within 180 days.
The actual application that was made for refund was dated,
well, let's ask Mr. Attorney, what are the dates, what starts the
Yeah,
180
so
days?
that's-
180 days starts when the original written application, the building permit fee is
Was paid.
and then
Okay,
and then the request has to be made within 180 days after the fee payment.
so there's a discrepancy in the dates between the staff report which says May 9.
no, I'm just looking
And
at
then the
his,
April,
Permit
Yes,
cancellation request for refund
Exhibit C.
is dated within
and so
180
that
days.
clearly is within 180 days.
Yeah, that one is, if that's the date.
I went by the staff report and what the staff is saying is accurate.
Well, okay,
But even if that does, if it was within 180 days, there's still a mountain decline because all of the other provisions are not
So-
met.
continuing on, I do see that, on November 7th, it said that the planning department has reviewed and conditionally approved the above based on the following conditions. And so, Mr. Safai, that is your proof that something actually was done, okay?
yes.
So the planning department actually did review. So you had stated in your introductory remarks that you have no evidence that they did anything.
They did not do review. What happened here, they sent me an email. They told me that you cannot raise a fence for 8 feet because it's not allowed. Wrote them back. I said that according to our ordinance, which I stated, they are supposed to approve for 8 feet. And then that's it. Nothing was done. Again, the issue is the cost should be actually reasonable. There is no reasonable one email that took 2 minutes from me and 2 minutes from them, and it was error from them to charge me $600. Major issue for me is not that 165. That 450 is troublesome because it's arbitrary. Where in our codes and in our approved city council fee schedule, they were allowed to collect $440. That arbitrary number is the major issue for
That
me.
seems to be a building plan check. Did you also have a building plan
No.
for the fence that you
No.
submitted?
No.
This was reviewed by the building department.
And there's,
He didn't include that in his attachments, but this is the letter that was sent back to him
Do I
on
have it?
November tenth. It was not included in his information.
Then you didn't give it to us.
No.
Mr.
I have no access to such a letter, and it's not before you.
Mr. Mayor, 2 points.
Yes.
Number one, Elizabeth
Yes.
is outside the 180 days. 180 days would run March 31st. This is dated April 16th
14.
or 14th, still 14 days late. Under any,
January, February, March, no, it's
April,
April 30th is 180 days.
The discrepancy is the claim form that was submitted to the city clerk was May 9th. That's what was noted in the staff report. His actual claim for reimbursement was the April 14th,
Yeah.
which was in the.
Okay, well, let's assume it's within.
either way, it doesn't,
Okay.
either way, the permit fees, and I'm sure that the council's pretty familiar, the permit fees are based on valuation of the work to be done. The applicant tells the building department what the valuation is. They calculate the number, and I believe George passed out tonight, a copy of the Uniform
Permit fee.
Building Code
Uh-huh.
amounts that are uniformly applied to everything.
Mr. Whitmer had a comment.
Yes. So there was a plan check fee, which is, we got a receipt for that here, and then the letter on the 7th indicates that it was identified, or it was identified to them that he needed to do a few things to his plans before we could then pull his permit, in which case when you pull the permit, then you pay a permit fee.
Correct.
So the plan check fee was a 400 or whatever it's, $100.
For the building component, right?
Yes, that was the plan check fee, the arborist check fee, you know, because there was also a mention about the heritage tree. So I understand, just want to make sure I understand it right.
So there are two sets of plan fees.
Right.
There's planning review, that's the $160, and there's building review, which is based on permit valuation, and it's 65% of the value of the permit.
And there'll be some technology fee on top of
Yes,
that.
$5.
So it's clear that, first off, that the plan check had occurred and there was communication back to yourself with regards to that, with advice of what they wanted to have before they would approve anything further. I agree with Councilmember Lewis that it seems to me, I think it's April, even
It
if
is.
you count for 31 days. it's
Exhibit
26
F
days. Yeah.
is a May 9th document that staff's been going off of.
That was the claim form, right?
But
I'd like to for a moment to try to clarify an issue, I'll go back to it. Mr. Spy, did I hear you say that you are not contesting the $160 fee?
I'm only contesting to refund of 80% of $160 because there was no work done. Even if they had issued a permit, according to the set policy of the town, they should refund 80% of it. It's in black and white written on the application that I filed with the city. So that's 80%. That 440 is the major issue for me, that I want to know why they are charging the citizen of this town.
I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmer, you
No,
had
it's okay. You can go on, that's fine.
comments? Mr. Williams, please.
Some of the questions, there's in your conclusion, the amount of 568.27, I think kind of explained that it doesn't have a foundation based on a fee structure. Does that sound right? And if I'm not mistaken, was there a second review of the plans because of the correction?
Well, the letter that you just
Yes.
saw,
Yes. Which-
dated November 10th,
Yep.
indicates that the
What was
building
asked?
department reviewed
Right.
the plans.
Yep.
So there was review by the building department, review by the planning department. The 65% of the building valuation is part of the town's fee resolution that's online,
Which is
on the
this.
town's website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is how it was calculated, with the fees calculated on the amount that you, submitted your building plan for.
I did not have any figure in my building plan. Never submitted
Yeah.
anything because I had no estimate. I had no contractor yet
Is
at that
there
time.
We don't have that
We don't
attached
have
to it. Ours is just a rejection of the claim.
There is no documentation that ever such a thing existed.
We don't have the original,
It's probably
application.
over in the building department, but it's not a part of the rejection of the claim process.
I know,
It's a part of his narrative.
but that would help us understand what was on the permit application so that we could see if they had indicated an amount that was estimated for the cost from which this fee schedule was calculated.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we wanna do the right thing. I mean,
Correct.
Clearly, we don't want to have residents feeling that they are being taken advantage of, and we really want to make sure that our staff follows all of our fee schedules, and accurately. I think that's, you know, what we don't want residents feeling like. I know residents feel that these fees may be too high, but if they're in our policies, if they're part of what we have written down, and it's clearly available for you to look at, then we can't waffle about that.
Absolutely, that's the reason I'm here.
Right.
There's no other reason, Ms. Lewis, except that to be here.
Right. So I think the way the fee was allocated, the $400 and some odd dollars, was based on evaluation that was somehow.
So the,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but we have a permit tracking, online tracking software for permits. So Stephanie just looked that up, and within that software, permit tracker, there's a valuation attached to this project of $47,000. If that was not provided by Mr. Safai or the applicants, the building department will estimate it based on the scope of work.
I paid $13,000
Well,
last
of course
time I
they-
erased the fence,
And
that's all.
that is a determination for the
I
building.
mean, yeah.
That seems awful high, because I think it was a fence along Marsh Road,
Block-
right?
block-
Right.
A block wall.
I paid last time, before that, $13,000 for it, and I have a record because I submitted to the town at that time. Then there were some construction was going on Marsh Canal. There was a lots of compacting, and some of these fences became loose. I got scared may fall on somebody, but thanks God the town fenced it, so nobody's gonna go by it.
I know.
Thanks to you
Isn't
all,
it
you
good?
know. Because of that, I really had no reason to repair because I was not afraid anybody gonna get hurt,
Of course.
and that was the reason.
Yeah.
And I'm here again not because of that much money. I just want them to follow the rules. That's all.
I think the confusion is that you feel that the valuation of the fence is much lower than, because of your personal experience, than what was extrapolated by our, estimated by our building department according to standards and building standards. There's formulas. And I know that we've had other residents who are builders who say that they can build a house for, you know, X dollars a square foot, when in fact, you know, it's like a third of what most other contractors do.
Correct.
But the reality is, so in what you should have done on your application is put your valuation in there, and from that, it would have been calculated your fee.
At that time, our valuation was 0. 0 multiplied by any number equals 0.
No, if you make application
Yeah.
to do a project, that application, that permit application has to have a valuation because you're actually.
They did not ask for it.
Well, that's
And I
because
did not know such a thing
they will
exists.
default to estimating it.
By the other way, that 440 should have some basis. That's all
And I
I'm
think
here
that it's
for.
on the building application for that.
If there is such a thing, Your Honor, or
Yes.
you are deny this. But if there is no number,
Yeah.
then you may not deny it.
You know, I think your best is.
Well, I think that there are 4 problems with your petition. One is, you clearly say that you thought that the $440.27 was an unreasonable fee. And I would not challenge you on that. It might be an unreasonable fee, but the right thing for you to do would have been just not to pay it, not to have taken that permit or made that application. You chose to do it by paying it. I can see from what's on the town's website exactly how they came up with that amount. It's 65% of the building permit fee, and the building permit fee for a $47,000 structure would have been $432.06 plus $11.15 for each additional $1,000. And if you add that up and take 65% of it, you come up with the $440.27. I'm not saying that that estimate of $47,000 was accurate or reasonable. I just know that's how they calculated it, and we are told by the building department that they did do the plan check. So they actually did work. We can't charge for any building fee any more than the cost of the service that's provided. You can't charge any more, that's against the law, and we're careful not to. But so I think, you know, your claim that it's unreasonable, it is perhaps reasonable, but you shouldn't have paid the fee if you believe that, which I could respect. Then that's one item. Second item is you said that the services weren't rendered. It looks, from everything that we've been told by the building and planning department, they in fact did do the building check. They did.
He said, I'm here before you.
No, we have
Under
clear
oath says that I did not receive any document from them
Well, you
saying
may
that
not-
they did any work.
Yeah, that I could believe that, but I don't.
He's got a letter from the planning department. in
To
the
who?
pack that he submitted to us.
To you,
No,
Who has that November 10 letter from the other?
There's a November 7th letter where they do acknowledge that they've completed the review.
And what's been done?
what they did.
Let's get this. If we can get this letter to
Thank
you,
you.
it's a November 10th letter.
It's not in, well, it's actually in your pack, the November 7th letter is in your packet, which acknowledged that they had done the work. So,
and it was sent to you.
anyway, let me just finish, there were 4 points. Those are two, which I think those are reasonably debatable, but, you know, my advice would have been don't pay the fee if you think it's unreasonable. Then in your statement B, you say that under the town of Atherton policies, the building department must refund 80% of the said fee because petitioner withdrew his application before any work was done. There's two inaccuracies there. One is, it's not a must, it's may. They may refund it, and it's not if the work wasn't done, it's if the plan check wasn't done. There is an ability to refund the permit fee if you've actually gone forward and paid the permit fee after the plan check, but you didn't do the work. But we don't face that because you never you didn't pay the permit fee, you never went to that stage, you just did the plan check. And that's not whether the work is done or not, that's not the issue here. The issue is whether the department actually engaged in the plan check. And they say they did, so.
To issue the permit.
Pardon?
Right, to issue the permit.
Yeah,
The letter says it did. His own exhibit A.
but
But that's,
apparently you didn't have that letter, which maybe was.
No, I have not seen that before.
It would have been good to give it to you.
But there was a letter on the 7th that's in the
There's
pack.
a letter on the
That's
7th that's
Just
part
look
of,
at it in your-
part of the 30 pages.
Yeah,
I've read all 30 pages.
Thank you so much
submitted
for
very
reading it. I
carefully.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Comment? I will say, just because I've been limited here, and thank you everybody else for talking, and not often that I don't talk, but in this case, I've actually been in your situation. I completely understand, you know, when you go to a permit center and say, hey, of course, I haven't done it here, but I've done it in other jurisdictions, and it is painful when you hear the cost of a project and that your assessment is based on the cost of that project, and I may have been a little short on what my project value was because I didn't like the permit fee. And that is a heavy cost for a cost of a fence, and I can understand a $400+ fee is painful. But unfortunately, you know, those fees are recovery cost fees based on the project, and so I empathize with you.
Thank you.
I feel it, but I think that staff here has complied with what I think, you know, we are required to comply with and documented the trail, so. But I feel it.
Again, I want to thank you for allowing me to come before you. I appreciate that.
yes.
Thank thank you for taking it seriously and bringing it before us.
So we
Yes.
appreciate it, 'cause
I thank you.
I guess my takeaway from this is that it's important for our staff at the staff level to, when they interact with a resident, to fully explain all of the fees that are being assessed, how they're being assessed, and make sure that your applications and your plan that you submit for plan check or building permit are completely filled out, and you're completely aware of the costs. And thank you. And I think that that's just for all of our department heads.
Again, I want to thank you all.
Okay, we have one last comment from Mr.
So
Redmond.
Yes.
I think, George, I think it's, when people are filling out permit fees, and, it's being assessed on perceived value. If the client doesn't put down a value, then staff should bring that to their attention and not arbitrarily put a number down there, because I have a hard time understanding how that's, even on a large lot, maybe 47,000, even though it was made with brick and cement, it just seems like an awful high number that he got stuck with, and he didn't know how the number got assessed either. So I think it's important that the building department says, are you gonna put a number down here? Let me tell you what we would put in, and is it gonna be that much? So there's gotta be a little bit of
Checks and balances.
But I think it's a formula that they use. I don't think it's arbitrary.
Well, if we could, counsel, I think we've gone at this for a while, and we're all basically in agreement.
Notifying the applicant is a good thing.
Yeah.
I agree.
Any
Thank you.
motion from any member of the council? Do we have a motion? What's your name? Any motion?
So I
Well,
move to
we have
deny
to
the
move forward to reject the market-based thing.
Okay,
Whatever you say. Okay.
yeah.
I think Elizabeth reached to it a little bit. And then just second, Bill, is that okay?
I recommend that we adopt a resolution denying the claim filed by Cirrus Supply, but also direct staff to pay a little bit closer attention to informing residents. Okay?
You second that, Mr. Wood?
Yes, that's sure.
Okay. Now let me make sure I'm phrasing this properly, so an aye vote is for the denial.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Thank you very much. Okay. That takes us to the regular scheduled regular agenda, which we got in number 22. A budget amendment for the charging station equipment at Oklahoma Park and Town Limits.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just in brief history, in 2015, we received a grant from the Air Quality Management District for 2 charging stations at Holbrook Palmer Park. We went out to bid, got estimates for what those would cost. We got the lowest responsible bidder, $20,000. The highest bid for $39,000. We brought that to the city council. The city council said, well, time out, maybe we don't want 2 charging stations in the park. Maybe we just want 1. Can we modify the grant? We went back to ABAG or AQMD. AQMD said, no, you need to put in 2 charging stations. That's the grant. If you don't do 2 charging stations, you don't get the grant. So then we went back to the council, talked to the council about it. They said, well, maybe we can put them here at the Civic Center. So we found a location here at the Civic Center that would be least impacted by the Civic Center project in the interim, knowing that we could then relocate the station as part of the Civic Center project at that point in time when it needed to be. So then we went back to the original bidder for the project, Bass Electric. During that intervening period of time, costs went up. Number 1, number 2, the location had changed. So instead of trenching for 1 spot in two stations, they had to trench in 2 different locations. So the estimate changed to around $44,000. Again, remember the high bids from the prior location was $39,000. So if we went back out to bid, in all likelihood, 46 might well be the lowest bid, and the others would be higher. We don't know. So what we're bringing to council tonight is the opportunity to move forward at 44 with a $12,000 grant for 1 station at the park and 1 station here in the Civic Center, or end the terminated project and just not go forward, and direct staff maybe to go back to ABAC, see if we can extend the timeline so it coincides with the Civic Center project, or just reject the grant. That concludes the staff report.
Okay. Any clarifying questions from members of council?
That's clear.
Okay. Comments from members of the public? Seeing none, bring it back in. Comments from members of council?
I'll be first. Yeah, I love that. Since I took fifth place last time. Obviously, a little bit of a shock that the value has gone up to the degree, but the scope of work has clearly changed. My thought on this really is we're doing a civic center project, we're doing a huge project for the park potentially in the very near future. I think that if we postpone this and push this off and reapply for future grants, because I think it will have an opportunity with all the trenching and all the equipment that we're having here to put stations at either location, and I think at far less cost than what's currently here, especially if we got areas exposed. So, you know, my personal opinion is to really be thankful that we did get these grants, but to reconsider it when we move forward.
Other comments?
So I feel that, I was in favor of putting one in the park, not two. And we are about to embark on tearing up a lot of the space. It seems to me a little foolish to spend extra money knowing that whatever we install in a year or two, we're gonna be potentially pulling it out. So I'd be, unless we feel that we could get, some relief on having it delayed and having it become part of the Civic Center project and have the grant apply for that, I would be in favor of that. Else, I would say, let's just reapply at a later time. So, I'm kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, but I think that would be worthwhile at least finding out. But if we can't, if the answer comes back no, then the vote would be no.
Anyone else? Mr. Tolan, Lewis?
Well, I think it's silly to do an electric charging station for $34,000, which is what the net cost would be to us. We're probably gonna do a whole bank of electric charging stations somewhere in the Civic Center when we do that, so I guess I think we probably should have rejected it before or gone with two in the park. It doesn't make sense to try to put one into the Civic Center when we're gonna do
Right.
this big project.
I agree with Councilmember DeGoya, and because I always thought it was silly to try to divide it and put one there and one there, because some of the cost efficiencies of putting two side by side, like in a parking lot at the park, would have been made a lot more sense. And I have to disagree with the assumption of Councilmember Widmer respectfully that we're going to tear up everything and at the park for the water retention thing.
No, I was talking
And
back here, not the park. I didn't mention the park.
that's what I heard you say, that we're going to be tearing that up
No,
there.
park not here.
Okay, so because we would, what we're planning at the park for the water is not where the parking lots are.
I agree.
So, okay, so if there was a reasonable place to put two at the park, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But time has gone by and the costs have gone up. But and
Well, just clarification,
Yeah.
cost escalation is because of the two locations.
Yeah.
It's a cost escalation because of the two locations, and there were some union costs, I don't know, materials and labor,
because we've been playing around with this for
2 years.
yeah. Which, you know, it could have been installed by now. So that's irritating to me a little bit, because I think that we could use two of them at the park in a reasonable position. And I hate to turn money away, grant money away. We sit here and we say, we want to get grants, we want to try to get, help with public funds elsewhere. And then when we've got something, we throw it away. So I'm happy to do what everybody else wants at this point. But we would have had two at the park using this $12,000 grant. And happy.
If I could actually went the other way about the park, just to be transparent, which is my general view of the park is that we should not be adding infrastructure to the park if we don't need to. And even just to plug in stations there is a little bit of infrastructure. I'm not sure what benefit it brings to the people of Atherton, all of whom live within, whatever, a mile and a half of the park. I'm sure there's some benefit for soccer games or Little League people coming in, and I recognize that. But I just questioned every bit of infrastructure that goes in the park, and I wasn't convinced that was a
Understand. But we do have parking spaces. We're not getting rid of parking spaces or parking lots in the park.
I don't know. I think that some of the plans we've talked about in the past would have done things like have fields where people might park, and when overflow parking is required, but otherwise there'd be a little more green in the park. We have talked about it. In any event, I think everybody was sort of in the same place unless you wanted to make a separate motion on something, considering putting a vote on park.
Well, can I just ask a question?
Please.
The $29,000 bid is no longer any good.
Correct. Okay.
I think my opinion is we either go forward to put the two in the park or we rebid it in the future.
And hopefully get some kind of a grant.
Yeah. Well, I think that BACMed, this is BACMed, right? BACMed is going to continue to encourage EV charging stations. That's part of their general plan, and this isn't the first time they've done it. So I do think they'll do it again. I do also think the cost of trucks is going to go up.
The cost per station. Technology changes.
Possible.
Yeah, may go down. Also, I think there's one who buy electric cars.
I also don't think there's a huge need in the park. I mean, I understand the argument about not putting more infrastructure in the park. I think keeping the park as pastoral as we can makes lots of sense, and I feel strongly we should be committed to that, and I think we are. I do think that we do have parking in the park, and if people are driving electric vehicles, you want to be able to accommodate them. It's not much infrastructure, but it's a valid issue.
Anybody a motion on this?
Do we need a motion?
Do we?
I don't believe we do. I think I have the direction, which is extend the grant if possible to coincide with the Civic Center project, and if not, eliminate the grant and reapply.
And through the chair, can we push off 23 and 24 to the end and do 25 and 26 now?
Yes, we can.
Where's your request? You have to have me out here. Mr.
Is that right?
Fine, I'd love to do that.
Okay.
Miss Allison
I
Wonder.
have read all the resolutions.
Oh,
Shall we move on to item number 25 then? And then we'll come back to 24.
Please.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm actually going to turn this one over to Marty.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This recommendation is for the Alameda Dale La Pulgas Corridor Study. Is to authorize the issuance of request for proposal, which is attached to your staff report, to prepare additional traffic study analysis along the Alameda corridor between Valparaiso Avenue and Woodside. Just some brief background. The City Council has previously expressed concern regarding traffic flow and operations along the entire length of the Alameda corridor through the town. Traffic analysis along a portion of the corridor has been done by the Las Lomitas Elementary School District as part of their renovation project and the proposed signal at Walsh Road. And the town had requested them to do some additional traffic analysis to accommodate our needs. And some of that was done, but some of the key points they said they could not do. And that was primarily during the traffic peak hours. They did do an analysis during the school peak hours, but not during the regular traffic hours, which are generally 7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 p.m. in the afternoons. So what we're asking for is if the council would like to move forward with doing a further analysis to augment the school study and to assess the impacts of the corridor with the potential of a new signal at Walsh Road and new school driveway, and then also to further analyze the intersection of Alameda to Atherton during the peak traffic hours, during the AM and PM hours, collect additional traffic data, and also analyze that data as part of that consultant work. The proposed RFP that is attached to your report will provide this additional study for this corridor and provide a comprehensive picture of the potential impacts and improvements needed along the Alameda segment. And with that, that completes my presentation. I do want to just add that the school study that was done, the town did not contribute financially at all to that, and they had full control over the timeline of how long that took to get that completed. So that was done by this district, and the town had really no control over that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, please.
Marty, is their study valid? Will it help with our study if we move forward?
We can use parts of what they did, data collection and analysis, yes.
And
But that's only during the periods, the school peak hours, and
right,
not.
so not all day.
Correct.
Or
Yeah, generally we want to have them look at, for this RFP, is during the 7 to 9 a.m. peak period, the rush hour in the morning, and then the PM rush hour. They looked at what the school hours, the peak for that was, 8:15 to 9:15, and like 2:30 to 3, I think it was.
Okay, yeah.
So it doesn't help us much to figure out, how can we improve that corridor.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss.
And Mike and Marty, anybody who wants to chime in on it. Knowing Alameda the way that I do, and knowing that a road diet just occurred at Alameda at Woodside Road, and that there is the high probability that another road diet is going to do downstream at Alameda, where it splits into Santa Cruz. Would it be prudent for us to include that in the overall analysis, because that's just going to add another bit of flavor to the analysis?
Absolutely, we would have the consultant look at that as part of the existing picture per se.
The guys in the vest were out at Alameda at Santa Cruz, Sandhill, up there today.
Oh. Mr. Lyon?
Yeah, so when I look at what the RFP would charge the consultant with, it doesn't look like there's specific level of service and assessments at the intersection of Walsh Road and Alameda Villas Pulvis, which is where the school would like to put a traffic signal. We're really looking at the whole corridor, focusing on several intersections, most importantly the Atherton Avenue, Alameda intersection. I think that's appropriate. Is the reason that we're not looking at the level of service at Walsh is because the school's consultant really did that at their most pressing time?
Correct. That's correct.
So do you feel comfortable that we can rely on, once we've got our analysis, looking at the whole corridor, if they were to come to us and ask us to support, at least enable them to put in a light, that the analysis that their consultant did would be sufficient for us?
Yes.
So my remembrance of when we started this was that, yes, there was a request to look at this for the school, but the total request from the council was the same as we're doing on ECR, end to end. So we're not favoring one intersection from another intersection. We're not trying to force fit an intersection into a decision. Because there's lots of comments, as you know, on the transportation committee with another area where they want to talk about a roundabout or lights or other things like that. And there's several other locations, and then the information that Carrie has brought up, I think, is quite relevant, and we really should reflect that into this RFP. But I don't want to see the RFP go out where it's prejudicing, a decision to say we've already decided it. Just give us the answer so that we can make it happen.
No, that's not,
At Walsh Road. We want their plain vanilla analysis on what they really think should happen all along that corridor for us, with the understanding of what already is happening in the other jurisdictions.
See,
If I could, if we're done with questions, let's see if any member of the public has any comments. If not, bring it back to comments from the public, which will give Ms. Lewis a chance to drink some water, because she's got a comment brewing, I can feel it. Were you a good comment there?
I was a little bit, well, I just, following up Councilmember Whitmer's comments about plain vanilla all around, it can't be looked through that lens because the school is pushing to have Walsh Road stoplight. And that's almost, I think, a fait accompli. I mean, I think that the consultant needs to look at it through that lens, that there will be a stoplight at Walsh Road. So,
Mr. Glenn?
Well, I don't know if the consultant needs to assume there's gonna be a stoplight at Walsh Road, but I think, we're not looking at it at every intersection on Alameda. We are looking at the whole corridor, but if you read the RFP, there's specific intersections where there's to be a level of service analysis done, which the school's consultant did at Walsh Road and Alameda, and this RFP has us doing that at Atherton and Alameda. We're going to look at traffic counts at many intersections, and they look appropriate to me. It's looking at, if anything, it's overkill. It's looking at Woodside Road, Stockbridge, Atherton Avenue, Walsh Road, Lago, and Valparaiso. So that's the entire corridor, and I think.
Just want to make sure we're even.
I think,
Looking at it, 'cause they
in terms
may
of
be
traffic
something-
counts, I think it's even, but in terms of doing the more detailed LOS analysis, that's really being focused on Atherton Avenue, and we need it for Walsh Road if we're gonna judge putting a light in, but that's what I asked Marty, and he just said that the school's consultant did that, and we can.
For their
No,
time
you
period.
have a report here.
It's attached to the
to the
report, right.
RFP.
For their time period. We need to do it.
Turner time period, right.
Yeah, we need to expand it to the.
So I mean, we can certainly look at it, part of this RFP, how it looks in the AM and PM during the traffic periods, but they're gonna come to the council at some point and say, hey, this meets the warrants, the Caltrans warrants during our peak periods, right? And I don't know how it's gonna fare if when we do it during the peak periods, the traffic peak periods, more than likely it might meet warrants there again, I'm not sure though. We can have the consultant look at that though.
When we
Oh,
discuss.
no, I'm sorry, Rick was mid-comment.
I think that's right, but the thing, and if you read the school's consultant's analysis, they do a warrant analysis, and they came to the conclusion that the intersection of Atherton and Alameda has the warrants for a full-fledged light 8 hours a day. And they've got, that's the analysis in there. I think that one thing we want the consultant to do is if there's any change at that intersection between Alameda and Atherton Avenue, we need to understand what impact that may have if a Walsh light goes in.
Right.
Right, because we don't want a problem to occur with that Walsh
No,
light.
it was our intent to have them analyze that corridor, assuming there's a light there.
That's what Elizabeth said, that's fine. I think that will give us the information we need.
But my understanding when we discussed this, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did say that putting a light at one location versus another location could have an impact. And that's why we wanted to look at both. Atherton Ave specifically as well, because as you know, there's been a lot of discussion on Atherton Ave from the Transportation Committee as well as Walsh Road. And so there needs to be that analysis as to, you put it at Walsh Road, what's the impact going to be, and do we need to do anything further on Atherton Ave? If it's more warranted to do something on Atherton Ave, is that have an impact to lessen the requirements of something over at Walsh Road?
Walsh Road is.
And that's what the district study
That's what we
did.
talked about.
The district study actually did that, but during the school peak periods.
Yes, I understand that, so
So-
that's why I'm saying we need to do it for.
And that's what our intent is here.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
If I could on this, a couple things struck me. One, was it really January 2016 that we looked at this? Okay, so it's been going on 2 years, and that's a long time to get to this point. Okay. Another thing is following up from the Transportation Committee's interest in this was they were focused on the intersection of Atherton Ave and Alameda Las Pulgas. And the question was not so much a light, they were actually talking about roundabouts and looking at that. And I think that we as a council looked and said, well, we ought to be considering the entirety of that corridor because a decision, for example, if there's a light on Walsh Road and a roundabout in Atherton Ave, the light may just have the effect of backing up traffic through the roundabout, rendering the roundabout useless. So I thought that was my understanding. We were trying to see how this would fit together and having a comprehensive look at the traffic flow.
And that's what this is gonna do, this RFP.
Go ahead.
I just wanna make a point about the Walsh Road. Like, that has everything to do with, safety for school children and not so much, throughput or traffic, management. I think that's the key thing there. So it's like mixing metaphors almost.
Right.
Actually, let me just add, because it does, so I read the whole report, and what the report clearly says is that there's currently a problem at school times, particularly in the morning, with the Safe Routes to School issue, exactly what you're addressing. But the school is proposing to change the driveway intersection to move it from where it is where the egress is right now, and not to have the access from Camino al Lago coming around and onto the parking area off Alameda de las Pulgas, but to have the entrance into that new parking area that they're in the process of building come in from Alameda de las Pulgas. And the consultants were right across from Walsh Road. And the consultant's report says when that happens, there is going to be a level of service problem at the intersection between that driveway on one side and Walsh Road on the other side. And that warrants, in their case, I believe it said it warrants a 4-hour light, right? Which means a light during the period which is intense, which is school drop-off and pickup. But I don't think that there's the analysis in here that we've all talked about, that Mike articulated, that if there's a change at the Atherton Avenue intersection, or if there's a change at either of these intersections, what the relationship might be between the two, and we need to look at that.
That's pretty far away from each other. It's not.
Okay. What do you need from us on it?
Motion to move the RFP forward with the comments into the RFP as the council's indicated.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Make sure you integrate the comments that we've heard.
Okay. Will this move to item 26, the Bayfront Canal
Yeah,
issue?
Is that 10 minutes?
By the way, just on that last issue, that RFP I thought was pretty good. I mean, it's not exactly the times we want, but, it was the times we needed, and it was quite thorough.
and we'll incorporate the comments we heard today from council.
Item 26, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to turn this one over to Marty as well. He's going to do a very brief staff report, and then there is a representative from the county here this evening, I believe, to answer any questions the council may have on this issue.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This is a report regarding the Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel Flood Protection and Restoration Project Planning, Design, and Environmental Permitting Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. We have 2 recommendations in your staff report today. Certainly, it's the council's decision which way to go, but the first is to authorize the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute an MOU in partnership with the city of Redwood City, City of Menlo Park, and the County of San Mateo, otherwise known in the MOU as the Collaborative, to complete the planning, design, environmental permitting, and secure property access rights for the proposed Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel Flood Protection and Restoration Project. The other recommendation before you is to receive the proposed project MOU tonight and request that the Collaborative to delay its approval of the MOU until after a substantial portion of the design work has been completed on the Hobart Palmer Park Water Capture Project to determine project benefits this may have for the Bayfront Canal project. Some brief background. The Atherton Channel and Bayfront Canal watersheds are multi-jurisdictional watersheds crossing the town of Woodside, Atherton, City of Menlo Park, City of Redwood City, and the County of San Mateo. Both watersheds have experienced 60 years of repetitive flooding with 40 significant flood events from 1951 to present. The collaborative has participated in general discussions relative to the Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel Flood Management Restoration Project for many years, but have not had any dedicated funding for significant participation in the flood protection and restoration project until recently, when the County of San Mateo offered to take a leading role and dedicate funding from the County Flood Resilience Program to coordinate the necessary efforts to reduce flooding from a collaborative of the affected agencies. The purpose of this MOU before you tonight is to establish the terms and conditions for the cost sharing and responsibilities of the Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel project, to complete the planning, design, environmental permitting, and secure property access rights only. It does not include any kind of construction activities at this point. This is strictly for the environmental design and property. As you may be aware, the town of Woodside was invited as part of the collaborative. However, on July 26th this year, the town of Woodside notified the county that the town was not interested in participating in this MOU. The flow from each jurisdiction that discharges to the bay has been prepared and calculated by BKF Engineering, and based on proportional jurisdictional flow, the town of Atherton share has the majority at 38%. The city of Redwood City is 26%. The County of San Mateo 22%, and the city of Menlo Park 10.5%, and the town of Woodside 3.5%. Since the town of Woodside has opted not to participate, the other parties in the collaborative need to absorb the town of Woodside's share, the 3.5%, and with recalculating that, then the town of Atherton's share would rise to 39.8%. Redwood City would be 26.9%, the county's 22.8%, and Menlo Park's about 10.9%. Currently, the MOU has a not-to-exceed value of $1 million, which is to fund, again, the planning, design, environmental, and secure property rights for the project. Based on the revised calculated flows, the town of Atherton's share for the MOU is for an amount not to exceed $398,000, and the county has offered to loan these funds to the town with interest if the town would be so interested in doing that. And I did want to mention that the numbers that I've been just saying are slightly different than what's in your staff report, but they're actually in the MOU. So when the staff report was prepared, we didn't have the exact numbers. It came about a day later. So the MOU is the most recent MOU that we got from the county, but the staff report is out by about 0.5%. Finally, as council is aware, the town has received $13.6 million in Caltrans funds to implement the water capture facility at Hobart Palmer Park site and identify Tier 1 project in a drainage master update. Prior to committing additional funding of approximately $398,000 for the proposed Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel Flood Protection Project, the City Council may consider delaying their decision to participate in the MOU until after a substantial portion, and we're thinking about 30% of the design work, has been completed on the Hobart Palmer Water Capture Project, to determine the benefits that would have for the Bayfront Canal. Mayor, that completes my presentation. As the city manager said, Erica Apollo from the San Mateo County is here to answer any questions that the council may have from her point. Thank you.
Can I invite the county representative to say anything if you'd like? Just want to answer questions, that's fine too.
Yeah, sure, I can add just a couple of words. I think just in terms of, first of all, thanks for giving me a couple of minutes to talk to you.
I actually presented in front of the water committee, the CCAG water committee this morning, and one of the things that we did is we highlighted how wonderful this collaborative has been. It has been challenging. Obviously, we have 4 cities and a county, but this problem has been around for decades, and the fact that we are now finally, and just in the last 4 months since San Mateo County, since our flood resilience program has taken the lead, we've made tremendous progress on this particular project. And the key message is that this project is at the most downstream end of the watershed, but everyone is contributing to it. And when we make improvements to this project, everybody upstream, including Atherton, including Menlo, we're all have an invested interest because we are going to benefit from this. This project also will incorporate some improvements to adapt to sea level rise and to the changes in the climate. There's an opportunity here as a collaborative, we have a better chance of qualifying for grants. We actually had a really good conversation with FEMA last week. We met one-on-one. About a month ago, we were notified that we submitted our project, the Bayfront Canal, which this this MOU will fund. We submitted an application for a notice of interest, and it was accepted. So now what we are being given is the opportunity to submit for an application of FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which we're going for the maximum, which is $3 million. We also have, or Redwood City has a grant that they're actually, now that it's part of the collaborative, that money would go towards this project. That's about I think it's $1.13 million that's going towards this project. It would actually be lost by the end of next year if we don't make some progress towards construction. So real money is on the table that will help us reduce everyone's responsibilities towards construction of this project. So design is a small fee really compared to the bigger picture, and what we're looking to do is to really address the regional problem. Yes, it floods downstream near Bayfront, but it also impacts people going to work, people going to Stanford Medical, people going to Facebook, or just being on Marsh Road. So there's a significant amount of benefits, and if we sell this to the permitting agencies, the collaborative, what we're doing as a collaborative, to the permitting agencies, to the granting administrators, it's a really good sell. So it's a win-win for everyone. And of course, San Mateo County, as you indicated, has offered to extend a loan to Atherton so that they continue to be a participant. So,
Thank you very much.
Sure, no problem.
Any questions from members of the council?
I have a question.
Clarifying question.
Yeah. Marty, I see from all the discussion that this talks about the Bayfront Canal and the Atherton Channel. And my question is 100% of the water that goes into the Bayfront Canal coming from the Atherton Channel?
Yes, as far as I know.
The contribution is what what was calculated. So if I had the document, I could show you. It's based on area.
No,
but is it going down Atherton?
Is there any other water other than the canal?
Is there any water that's coming into the canal
Into Bayfront
Other
Canal?
than the channel.
other than coming through the channel?
There's water coming from Bayfront, and there's water coming from Atherton Channel that meets at this location.
And the water coming from Bayfront is coming from where?
From other jurisdictions, Redwood City and parts of unincorporated San Mateo County and areas in Menlo Park, the downstream Menlo Park that's right near Marsh Road. But all of those contributions have been identified and have been calculated, so those percentages have been spread out.
I follow up with that. So are those the percentages that we have here, that Atherton represents about 39% and Redwood City 26%, the county 22%, and Menlo Park 10.5%?
That's correct. And portions of the county also include all the way, there's 3 areas, includes Woodside, exactly.
Which is only 3. But my assumption was that coming through our channel is not all of Atherton's water. Coming through our channel, there's a lot of water that comes in from Miller Park, there's water that comes from Push River Valley, from Woodside.
Right, and so Exhibit A, which was, and we actually do have, if I had a presentation I could show you, the watershed is each of the contributions from the different jurisdictions, whether it's 3 areas of the county, and I think there are 2 areas of Menlo Park, yes, so.
They had it in front of them too.
Oh, they do that, they do that, okay, so on page 5 of Exhibit A, on the far right side, there is, you can see the blue is Atherton, the purple is Woodside, the green is Menlo. So you can see all of those areas have been broken up. And so those areas are all, that's the calculation that you see in that paragraph. Actually, there's a table, I think, in here that shows.
Where's the Bayfront water?
The Bayfront Canal is that red canal all the way at the top of your photo.
Oh, okay.
It's parallel. It's right here. Yeah.
Where it says Fifth Avenue Pump Station to the left of that.
Yeah, Fifth Avenue, but that's another one, by the way, that we do have a grant that has been, that is waiting to be spent on that pump station. That pump station cannot be upgraded. So those communities, there's 5 disadvantaged communities that are continuing to flood because we can't improve that downstream project. So they're basically, the water can't get out and they're getting flooded from water that's coming from the upstream end of the watershed. So they're the bullseye. So that's Bayfront Canal. Improvements to Bayfront Canal need to be made in the future as well. Those are right along Redwood City. So that's in Redwood City's jurisdiction. And so there's the purpose of this exhibit is to show all of the different improvements for flood risk reduction that are dependent on this one particular project. So our goal is to get to this, improving this outfall that we are describing here where the star is, that will unlock the possibilities, the probability of all of these projects being incorporated into the system. We're actually trying to do something different. We're not Alameda County, we're not Santa Clara County, we're not a flood district. If we were, it might be a little bit easier to do this, but because we have so many jurisdictions involved, what we're trying to do is through a collaborative, address this from a regional's perspective, as opposed to project by project basis. It could take a lot more time and a lot more money. There's a question for me or for?
I always complain because I don't get announced terrible. You had mentioned, is this a county-driven project or a California Regional Quality Control driven project?
That's a great question. This is actually a project that the reason the collaborative was formed is because this is an area that has so many different jurisdictions in one spot. The Regional Water Control Board is one of the, I would say, driving factors, but not the major factor. In this case, the major factor is flooding. The Regional Water Control is involved because they're interested in making sure that the water is clean when it goes into the bay. So they are a partner. We actually have met with the regional board at their offices back in March, where they promised that they would give us a permit for this project, which had not happened in many, many years.
So, just out of curiosity, and since you guys have been doing this longer than I've been looking at your information, is there a legal precedent? Because this is very unusual, where it's a project that is outside of the town of Atherton, and Atherton would be the largest contributor to the source of funding for it.
Right. So I guess
barking up a new tree.
That's interesting. We're all under a mandate to reduce our PCVs, right? This project will have multiple benefits. One will be to improve the water quality. One will be to improve, recreational,
Get the
everything.
benefits.
Get the benefits.
What about the precedent? So has anybody ever done something like this? Is this something that are you saying could be a future issue? Or is this something that is we're gonna cut the edge of where responsibility is as far as, let's expand this a little bit to traffic, where we can actually reach, since this is California Regional Quality Control. But let's say traffic impacts. These are impacts that obviously we're contributing downstream.
Yes.
That we're now becoming responsible for, that we weren't responsible for in the past. That's kind of like saying, okay, you guys did it, caused my problem, now we wanna fix the problem. Is that the direction we're going precedent-wise, or?
No, the reason, one of the things that we have found is that permitting agencies and granting agencies really aren't that interested in talking to one jurisdiction. They prefer to talk to multiple jurisdictions where they see that the funds that they're contributing or projects that they're permitting, because they're already very limited in resources. This particular model that we're trying to use here to address flooding issues, vulnerabilities of these communities to traffic, to emergency access, those kinds of things, we're just trying to take a regional approach so that we can have a better chance of incorporating.
One last question. You mentioned that the county had offered to front the funds.
Yes.
Did they tell us what those terms were?
There's a couple of different scenarios, and I was not part of those discussions, but that is it's.
I mean, I'm
yeah,
thankful that the county is making the offer.
Yes.
I would love to know what those terms are even before I was moving forward today, and that may be a discussion that we can.
I think I wasn't there the day that the meeting occurred with the county manager and the city manager. What I do know is that I think the one scenario is paying back over a certain number of years. Let's say it's $380,000. 38.
3.8 million.
What's that?
No, 398.
Yeah.
No, that's just the design
388,000.
component.
But
we're also
just
what I'm concerned is the big enchilada at the end of the rainbow here, which is the $10 million payment.
Yeah. So the 3.9. Yeah. So let's say that it was 3.98 million, right? So that's your contribution, 39.8%. Before we talk about those terms, we know that together we have a better chance of getting more grants. So if the cost of that particular project, which we already know, let's say ballpark figure $8 million, okay, and we have up to $4 million that we could potentially have as a grant. Now we're talking $4 million. Now we're talking this formula that you have in front of you. We're talking 39.8% of $4 million. So all of these things will reduce the cost. And let's not forget that you guys are also now embarking on your detention basin, right? So the water quality benefits for that, by the way, thank you very much. That will really that could be very useful, because we can say, oh, and one of our collaborative members is incorporating this detention basin, which is going to improve the water quality in the watershed. One of the first things, and it's in I think it's in the staff report, and one of the first things that the design team is going to do is look at the hydraulic model, which was commissioned by Stanford, which we received in June, which, by the way, had taken a long time to produce, but once they knew that this collaborative was working together, they handed it over and said, this is great, you guys, go, let's do something.
If I could interrupt on that one point, did the county, and somewhere in our documents, that the county was actually going to give some kind of notice to proceed on the hydraulic model today? Did that happen?
The notice to proceed on the hydraulic model. So the
Considering a notice to proceed on the first task review of the hydraulic model, says on or about September 20th.
Yeah, that may not have been updated correctly, but the reason we were hoping to do that today was because we thought if we got the go-ahead from, we would have the design team start. We would give the design team the notice to proceed today, waiting for you guys to say something. We pushed that down to the 26th for Menlo Park's council meeting, city council meeting, because we were not sure.
So that's my question, because Woodside has opted out.
Yes.
And so their 3.5% was spread around to the other 4 members.
Right.
Are we sure that those other 3,
The other 2 members will not drop out?
the 3,
Or-
right? Aren't there
Oh,
3?
San Mateo
County,
County as
Redwood
well. We're 3.
The county's in for sure.
We're in for sure.
So the county's in for sure. What about Menlo Park and Redwood City?
We have not had any indication that Menlo Park does not want to participate. They have been very proactive about this project.
But they haven't,
Their meeting's on the 26th. So all the jurisdictions already have their agenda packets, already in the queue to go to their city councils.
So who are you worried about?
I have a question.
What's that?
I said, who are you worried about?
Yeah, that question was too late.
I have a
Yeah.
question. I actually have 2 questions. One for our staff and the other for you. Does Lindenwood drain the Atherton Channel?
Yes.
Yes.
Portions of it, yeah. Pretty much all of it.
Well, what's identified on this map is all of it, but I don't know that all of it drains the
we'd
Atherton
have to
Channel.
go back
Well,
and
no,
look at that.
the drainage study was done by BKF.
It was done for BKF, commissioned by Stanford.
They actually incorporated Atherton's
Master
done by
drainage.
BKF.
Yeah.
Master
Mhm.
drainage plan.
Yeah.
That's very specific. If
Yeah.
you go back to our master plan.
Yeah, the 2015 drainage master plan done by MV5 was very specific, and they incorporated that.
So we could look at that, and I just didn't have a chance to
It-
pull it up.
Okay,
Can I
so
just add-
where does the Sequoia track drain to?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I would have to look at our
Because this map shows that there are areas both in in Atherton, North Fair Oaks, and Redwood City, all of which are east of the Sequoia track, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the way water flows there is right down between Stockbridge and Woodside Road, moving to the bay. And it doesn't include the entire Sequoia track in that drainage area, and that's a big area.
I would love to answer your question. I really don't know because I don't have the data in front of me. But what I can tell you is that the Stanford model, the hydraulic model, the hydrology and the hydraulics was vetted. It was QA/QC'd by 2 independent consultants before our MOU was formed. And the first order of business for us as a collaborative will be to get our design team. The first thing that we have, and that team, by the way, has already been selected with cooperation with the cities and the county. The first thing they're going to do is look at the hydraulic model and answer any questions like that. The most important question, I think, for this group is that detention basin do anything? Does it reduce the peak? Does it do anything in terms of flow contributions? Because that is not in the model right now.
Ms. Lewis?
That, in my discussion with the city manager today about that, I believe that our Holbrook Palmer Park detention basin should have the ability to reduce the flow because it would percolate. We would hold acres of water rather than releasing it downstream and let it recharge our aquifer and our wells in through. So, Mark, is that
Correct.
that's my understanding.
That's the concept, until we have a consultant and do all the geotechnical investigation about the soil conditions out there, and then bring the council exactly what can potentially be built there.
I just wonder if, the percentages might change a little bit.
Absolutely, and we included that kind of language in the
That
MOU.
it has the ability to be adjusted.
Yes.
And Redwood City would,
Yeah.
would step up.
Yeah, and there's things too. Again, we're trying to look at this from a regional perspective. So some of those other projects, like Bayfront Canal, for example, we know that there's some improvements that need to be made there. That would be a separate agreement with a separate group of, jurisdictions to make sure that the right jurisdictions were contributing to that project. There's some improvements to Bayfront Canal that could be done. There's Holbrook Palmer Park. There may be improvements to Atherton Channel. I mean, it's a concrete, channel. There are probably improvements that we can make to that. I have experience I've worked for many years for Santa Clara Valley Water District in working on Guadalupe River that goes from all the way to the airport all the way to El Viso. I was the design manager on that.
Amazing.
Also worked on East San Jose's Lower Silver Creek project, which it was a nasty channel. It was very narrow. We were able to widen it and make it more natural. It is a fantastic project in a very, very urban area. And so that helped the urban, remove some of the urban impacts.
Are we on to comments, no questions? I think we have one.
I got comments.
One, please.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Erica, you mentioned that just a few seconds ago that there might be improvements that could be done to the Atherton Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Does this MOU contemplate the parties that contribute to the Atherton Channel making a contribution to those improvements?
This MOU is strictly for that one project, the design of that project, the hydraulic modeling, and the third benefit of this work that we're trying to do is to identify what other projects, what other improvements should be prioritized. So again, we're trying to look at this as a system. If we were a flood district, we could look at the whole thing and say, hey, where do we need to make our investments? Where do we need to ask for money? Those are the kinds of things that I think.
So at a future date, though, there could be the improvements that the town thinks or the collaborative thinks would be beneficial downstream to do to the upstream Atherton Channel that could be contemplated everybody contributes to.
This opens up those conversations, right? It really opens up the conversation, and if we work together in this, and there's also this construction, there's operation and maintenance. Who does that and when and how? Those are the questions that we are concerned about as well, as the county is concerned as well.
May I throw it out to the public, see if there's any comments on this issue? Seeing none, bring it back. Comments from council. Mr. Weaver, you had some?
First off, thank you for the report. I have a couple concerns. The study was done for the hydrology report dated October 2013, and as we know, we've done significant improvements on the channel, which, although we had some preliminary discussions with other jurisdictions, they didn't want to participate at that time. And so actually things have quite a bit improved, not only with our cleaning up the channel as it's coming down to the Marsh Road channel, but then also fixing it. Secondly, a concern of mine would be when we're looking at what we're going to do, one of the things that you did mention is one of the goals is water quality improvement. When we're looking at investments people are making to stem the flow as well as to improve the water quality, it would be nice if we would have gotten or can get credit for the $13.5 or $13.6 million that's going into Holbrook Palmer Park, or that's anticipated to go into Holbrook Palmer Park. My concern is that it's not necessarily the design, but people don't design things unless they're planning on building them, and so there would be an obligation to do the building at a it seems to me at the same contribution rate, which is quite a bit of money for a small town like this. So I would, and when I go over the list of projects that you have listed here, our project is the absolute largest project of all the other projects that are listed. So I think that there needs to be some thought with regards to that. And I'd like to, sometime in the future, have our city council give us some advice on this before we make a commitment one way or the other. I do agree that we all have there are regional issues here, traffic also being one, that the region needs to attack them. And water flow is one, but I'd like to also have the county consider and discuss, back to our city manager, credits for the work that we're doing and the work we just recently done with over $4 million into the Atherton Channel and get some quality, get some control for that. So that's my comment.
Other comments, Mr. Lawyer?
Okay, I've got a number of comments, so bear with me. First, I entirely agree. This whole deal is premised on the concept that a regional approach to watershed management is the right approach, and I think that's correct. The MOU outlines responsibilities for the first of a series of projects that would provide a regional approach to flood risk management, which risk is ultimately principally borne right now by those that are along the Bayfront Canal. There's some flood risk in Atherton, and we've talked for quite some time about the need for other parties that contribute to the water that flows into the Atherton Channel to participate in the costs of maintaining that channel and the flood risk that's associated with it when it overflows, and we've gotten zero cooperation from them. So I think it's very important to put a stake in the ground to approach flood control from a regional perspective. I want to be very clear that that's really where I'm starting. I think it's the right thing for the council to support. Nevertheless, I think that it's very important that when we look at that we not repeat the errors that the state of California did when it established Prop 13 by choosing an arbitrary time period during which our communities set a tax basis, and if you had invested in your community during a certain period, you got credit for that investment, and if you didn't, you lost it. So this is a really complex thing, and I feel very strongly that it's a mistake just to take the amount of water that goes in and consider that to be the percentage that is allocated to each community. I think we have to look at what the communities have invested in managing their that flood risk control issue. And I agree that, Atherton has just borne a significant expense alone to address a significant channel upgrade that cost us about $4 million along Marsh Road. I propose, and I think that the committee should look at what the right time period to start looking at it is, but maybe it's the time period from October 2013 when BKF did its study. Some time period, 3 to 5 years, seems reasonable to me, and that's not included in this MOU. What is included in this MOU is recognition that there needs to be a process to modify the contribution percentages, and in the exhibits it proposes that one of those items to be considered is the proposed water capture and treatment facility in Holbrook Palmer Park, as well as a significant project that Menlo Park is considering. And I think those are good, but I think we shouldn't just be looking forward, we should also look back. And I'm not prepared to embrace this other than the general regional approach, which I think is the right thing to do, until that's been addressed. I think that needs to be addressed, and it may be that these percentages that we've got are in fact the water flow and then the hydraulic analysis, even if it's 4 years old, is accurate. I don't know, but when I look at the map, I asked about the Sequoia track. I don't live very far from there, and that water all flows toward El Camino, and I find it hard to believe that whole track somehow moves north, up into, down to the salt ponds rather than to the Bayfront Canal, but it might. What I would propose for us as a council is month. But the county decided on October 17th, and I understand the county's driving it, which is great. But I think we should, postpone a decision until October and see if there's a possibility for the committee to address these issues. And I don't know all of the complexities about how you figure out the financial contribution. I think you could start with the amount of water flow. But, there's also Carrie brought up the analogy to traffic, and there's a very real issue where we don't have any commercial enterprises, so Atherton doesn't obtain any development fees. We can't put development costs on a 10-story hotel that's going in next to Marsh Road, or a 6,000-person facility that's going in a new Facebook location. We don't have the ability to do that. Redwood City and Menlo Park are building like crazy, and that's impacting us in terms of traffic. I don't know that it impacts us at all in terms of water flow, but there's an ability to pass costs on when you have that kind of commercial activity, which we don't have that ability, and that needs, I feel like that needs to be discussed in terms of the contribution amounts. We're struggling to find the money to build a 25,000 square foot civic center, and these other jurisdictions, they have that money because they have commercial revenue that is totally different from us, and we just have to, I want to approach this regionally. I think the right way to approach flood control is regionally, but we have to be smart about how we deal with the financial contributions. And with respect to grants, I totally support the idea of getting grants, but I must say, Atherton participating in the grant-seeking committee is not a plus. Atherton has a hard time getting grants because Atherton's perceived to be a rich city. Even though the city itself isn't rich, the community is very wealthy, and we don't get grants because of that. The next item on the agenda is the Civic Center, and I talked to the Peninsula Advanced Energy Coalition today, and the state is seriously considering a requirement that the only grant monies will go to disadvantaged communities, which means we wouldn't get, even if we were trying to build the first Zero Net Energy Civic Center, we wouldn't get grant money from the state. I don't know if that's going to apply to us, but it's not necessarily a plus to have Atherton in your grant seeking group.
Other comments, Mr. Wiest?
So, I agree that the regional approach is, a nice way of looking at things, but it's also a nice way of projects that get put on the agenda, that jurisdictions that are in the middle of this, and we're in the middle of the Civic Center component, and it's tough to, all of a sudden address a project that we weren't directly involved with creating. Believe me, we have no issues creating projects, but this project, obviously, that we're not the origin. I believe in the concept. I think that Rick's got very good points, and which unfortunately the county and the city of Redwood City may not know that, we've got other drainage issues, that we'd like to solve. We're looking at a report here that's going to identify a pipeline that we have drainage problems that, matter of fact, over the weekend I had calls related to it. It's not even raining because this is on the agenda. You're dealing with the drainage issue downstream in Redwood City, and I have drainage problems on El Camino Real. Come to find out, we have a pipe that's blocked, and we've been told by other jurisdictions there's relationship issues, which I think that a relationship in this manner can help us solve other problems, because they can't be ignored, because we're contributing to a downstream component, which will make the downstream people in a lot better situation than they were today. Mind you, we didn't build there either, so there's another issue. Facebook built and all these other people that build. Sometimes you assume the responsibility of downstream issues if you choose to build there. I do think that because of the fact that a project like this will truly benefit more of to change its use, change its growth. It may not no longer be the least desirable property, if it is, in the area. It may become more desirable, and maybe there will be another campus there from one of its neighbors. I don't know that. But that is a benefit that that area will receive by a project like this. You already heard me just barely touch the vehicle component and where impacts. And like I said, we're the little town. I agree with this project. I think that for us, the fact is that in this, I don't see some things that I would like to see, and I am not opposed to the project concept itself. The thing that Councilman DeGolia already mentioned, the project that we're doing related to the EMUs and the park, and what could that potentially do, and where would that be recalculated? I would love to hear the condition, even though this is, and take no offense to this, only 300,000 in your words. That's a lot to us, you know, in a county perspective. I mean, I know you guys write those checks all the time, but for us, we don't even like writing those checks, and actually that's Robert. So the financial component, I would really like to see if the agreement is for a 7 to 10 year agreement, somewhere along those lines, to where we have an understanding when we make the commitment on a project like this, that we also understand what our financial obligation would be, minus the recalculations in this and that. But in general term, very thankful that you're off the ability to offer that. Thank you for having some extra money right there. Wish we had it. If you guys want to contribute to the Civic Center list. But that being said, that influences or can have an influence on how we finance this component, right? But it doesn't mean that we're not willing to be in this component. It just means that if we could push this to our next meeting and maybe gather some more information, where we kind of have a little bit more of an understanding, you know, with the recalculation component, make sure that the language there is clear, make sure that, I know that as a representative of the county, you will express our other concerns related to drainage, and we'd really love to have these same players down at the table at something else. And the final component, which is the financing component. Yeah, so, you know, but again, we all know that this is coming. I may not necessarily like the fact that all these things are coming, that other decision makers, because I, with Elizabeth and others here that attend the legacies, we like to obtain local control. But knowing that the California Regional Quality Control isn't there, went out of my control already, now that assessment upstream, and it's coming, I just don't like it. I like the concept, but I don't like the bills.
Other comments? Let me just confirm, our October meeting is October 18th? October 18th, like after, right, it's the day after the.
Day after the county's decision.
So if it could be pushed, that you could make the understanding that we'll make a decision on the 18th.
That's county.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's, yeah.
Again, can I just say something?
Please.
So we have put this into our agenda packet for October 17th, which means that, and the other, I think the other thing that's a big concern is we cannot get the consultants started to even do this hydraulic analysis. We don't agree, you know, to move in that direction. So I think I'm a little bit of a loss, probably not the right person to be talking at this point, you know, of what we can or can't do. My authority is it's limited. However, so we were hoping that we could get this, you know, agreements with the various jurisdictions so that we could go to the Board of Supervisors on the 17th, and then they would sign off on it. At this point, if Atherton would not sign off until the 18th, I'm not really sure if, you know, what would happen. We actually have to reconvene with the collaborative and decide if Atherton's not making any kind of commitment, then even to get the hydraulic analysis, you know, to get those results, which you guys really need to see. So the idea of hiring a design team or a design consultant to do the hydraulic analysis where you have direct control. And by the way, this analysis is from June of this year. The hydraulic analysis is as current as June of 2017.
Gordon, can I get back? I apologize. I'm still stuck on a timing thing. When you talk about the hydraulic analysis, is that the same as the review of the hydraulic
Yeah, I think it's, the
So,
title
the reason
is,
I'm confused, there's a statement in our packet, which I think is wrong, which said the county could do something by September 20, and the next sentence was, this task would be performed at risk by the county as it would begin prior to the entire collaborative schedule of approval.
right, so we would start, we would, assuming we would get approvals by the various, the way the MOU is written, we could give the consultants notice to proceed on September 26th. In the meantime, the different collaborative members would be going to their city councils to get approval. They would get approved by the county by the 17th of October.
And this is-
So all we're saying
When
is
does the city meet?
they meet on October 2nd. So the
when
idea is
city
to not lose any more time, get those consultants up. There's a lot of questions that we have, that you guys have as well, will be answered by this analysis that needs to be done, this review of the hydraulic model.
So,
Yeah, please.
I probably less, me personally, I think that we can probably iron out the language as far as the issues related to hydrology. If we have some concerns like Rick is mentioning, I think that's a minor issue. My big issue is that financial component,
Right.
the obligation, and that there's nowhere in here, I can dream of how, unless you would just agree to our terms and we can use your word and say, they want 50 years to do
I think,
this thing.
yeah, I might have just said that I
Don't wanna go
don't
there.
have any authority.
But you see what I mean? That's the biggest
Yeah.
plus, in my opinion.
Well,
Ms. Leesley?
so I think, the unknown here is, right now we're assuming that we are liable for 39%, of all the water that goes. When we do the Hobart Palmer Park project, can that be reassessed?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like what Rick was saying, like Prop 13, I mean, we're dealing with some percentages of revenue that were locked in place that are just so out of kilter right now in today's financing world that it doesn't make sense.
No.
Because so just because it's this way now, I mean, it has to be revisited and maybe reduce that.
And based on input that we received from staff and, discussions we've had with George, there are at least two places that I know of, I should know this by heart, in the MOU where it says that we will recalculate flows based on the findings, right, from the hydraulic analysis. If we incorporate Hobart Park and we find out that there's a significant positive impact of reducing the flows, that's going to reduce your contribution. It also says that you can pull out at any time. You give us 30-day notice, at the end of those 30 days, then we, the remaining collaborative members, have to decide if, how we have to do a temporary hold before we.
I just want to go on record. I think this is a fabulous project, and we should do whatever we can to make it workable for us, palatable for us, affordable for us, and with cost sharing, where cost sharing with other jurisdictions is reasonable. I really think that this has been something. I remember Barbara Pierce came up to me when I was first elected in 2008. I think it was in the 2009 area, and she says, "Would you like to be on our water committee for the Bayfront Canal?" Because she's from Redwood City, a long-term council person. Because even that 9 years ago, I mean, this has been a big problem a long time, and I think that we need to try to do our best to help solve it. But we need to make sure that we're protected. And I'm disappointed that Woodside has bailed out. That doesn't make me feel good, because they do contribute to our water flow. Water flows from Woodside into our channel.
Just a point, you could, instead of continuing all the way to the 18th, continue to your study session on the 4th.
Yeah.
To get in advance of the county meeting. Sorry.
I think that would be more reasonable. I would support that, city manager. I would support that.
Yeah, I think as much as we can get, and the concern issue before that, I mean, to me, it's a little premature today, it's my sentiment. That financial component, I mean, great, I'd love to know the terms. I'm signing a blank check, I'm committing to something, but on a blank check, I don't.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
We'd like to, before you jump in, one of the questions keeps coming up is whether we can amend the allocations, right? And the MOU, as I'm reading it, says that they may be amended, the flow contributions may be amended pending initial consultant review of additional projects in the watershed area that reduce or alter flow contributions. Any modifications to the contributing percentages will require approval of each party in the collaborative and an amendment to the MOU. Pardon?
That means they don't have to agree.
Of course, yeah.
That's how
But there's not, you're not necessarily locked into a financial contribution that's equal to the flow percentages. The financial contributions, the MOU allows it to be for an adjustment, which, doesn't necessarily require a flow contribution, or even if there's a flow contribution, if there's a financial adjustment, I don't know how we go about having a financial adjustment, but it seems to me that that's what Kerry said. I completely agree. That's the huge issue. We can deal with the hydraulics, and there's some questions that we're going to have around the hydraulics. If you're comfortable with the accuracy, that's fine. But the big issue is the financial contribution, and there's more factors than just water flow in what make up that. And I'm not going to be able to support. I don't want to go into the design unless we believe we're going to go into the construction. I think that we're very
pull out at the last minute.
and it's just not fair to anyone for us to say we'll contribute to the design, but we're going to stop it at that point or with 30 days notice. That there's got to be some bad faith that causes us to pull out with 30 days notice. If we're going to go into it, we have to expect we're going to be in it the whole way, and that means we've got to have a financial model that makes sense to us.
So again, I believe that, like I said, if we're gonna do a design, then obviously we're gonna do a construction. That turns into a lot of money, and we really got to understand really how this is being assessed. Other JPAs, which is similar, this is kind of like a JPA, it's not exactly, but other JPAs have multiple formulas of how the money is being assessed. And I do think that other than just looking at water flow, because as we've mentioned, we're doing a lot of good work on water retention, building hopefully we're gonna end up building the $13.6 million activity or water retention pond in the park that also is gonna filter out the, not only litter, but PCBs, which you said you wanted to get out. And we've done a lot of work on the Atherton channel, especially at Marsh Road. And so I do think that there needs to be a different type of formula that, and perhaps the consortium could consider that addresses the investment each community is making, and then something on population, et cetera. Not just on the water flow, because as Rick was very astute in pointing out, we haven't exactly been treated fairly on some of these other allocations that have been done out, at least in our view, on Prop 13. And so we are a little bit hesitant on having a fixed item. So, I would rather see some work being done on how those numbers are really going to be adjusted, because, as we've said, if we do the design, obviously the next thing is construction, because no one does design for grins. And there could be legal ramifications if we said, hey, great design, but we're out. So I do think that we need to have the full picture and the full understanding before we move forward. If we have it by the study session, great. If we don't have it by the study session, then I think that we have to wait until the next council meeting, or until we do have the information.
I think it goes to where one moment, let me just think, but I'm in agreement that it would be nice to know at least a not to exceed amount or something to plan on for the construction figures so that we can make an informed decision before we start down the path. I don't know whether it'll be possible to have that information, by the 4th or by the 18th or not at all. very curious, if you could address that, that'd be very interesting.
So, I think, Council Windman, I just wanted to say, the MOU right now is strictly for design, permitting, and easements. It does not include construction. What we say in the MOU is that this MOU could be amended for construction, or we could add language that just says, a different type of formula or a different approach will be used for construction. I think that should address that concern. And
If I could, that actually doesn't address my concern.
no, I was talking about
Okay.
Councilman Widmer. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, so my concern is that we.
But if I could,
Yes, please.
I appreciate your view on that, but I would like to hear from our attorney sometime in the future as we're looking at this again.
My concern, my view on it is not that we couldn't adjust or somehow pay for it in a different formula or a different allocation, but rather at this moment, we don't know if we're committing ourselves to $400,000 a year. We don't know if we're committing ourselves to $4 million over the next 5 years or,
Right.
$8 million over that's what I'm trying to get a sense of as you roll it out. And that's my question. Can we get a sense of, is it be possible to get a sense of that in 2 weeks or no? Is that ridiculous?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? I'm not sure.
We have a study session in 2 weeks.
On the 4th,
And we
yeah.
want I'd like to have some sense. We keep saying we don't want to pay for the design if we're not serious about doing the construction. But we have I don't have any sense of what that is, any estimate, any.
So we know that the cost is about
It's
$8 to
about
$10 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're applying for a
It's
$3
about-
million grant opportunity, which would lower that cost.
It's about $8 million. We're in the process of applying for a $3 million grant, which I'm feeling pretty confident about it. We have a $1 million, $1.13 million grant. It was a grant that we're at risk of losing as a collaborative. So that adds up 4. So that leaves 4 just for this project. And then of course, the flow, if I could go back to the contributions or the reduction in flow from that detention basin, Holbrook Park, that could even reduce the number even more. So
Just since you were mentioning, do you have any idea what the tide gate upgrade is going to cost? Because it's all parties involved, and I'm sure that would be another thing that you would want inclusive in this project or not.
right now, we're just looking at the outfall, how we're trying to drain into the ponds. That's all this project entails. It does not entail this design does not include these other. All it does is identify what these projects are, confirm that that they exist, because
I'm assuming, because it says all parties, that the same players that are in this game would be asked to contribute to the tide gates upgrade. And are you piggybacking, is this just a dream, or maybe not?
That's not.
Okay, I'm only reading what was provided by.
So out of $4 million, assuming they get the $3 million grant, that puts our share at about $1.6 million, without.
Well, if you do a 10-year loan, 1.6 over 10 years.
That's the point I was trying to get to, Mr. Mayor. Cities can't borrow money, so it's a very interesting concept for them to loan us money. Now, one thing that can be done, we have to go get bonds and things like that because it's constitutional. We don't have the ability to go to a bank and borrow money. Now, the county can pay for the project and we can repay them, not on a loan basis, but on a pay back our share of the project over a period of time. But I think we should know what that concept is. For them to just say, we'll loan you the money is one thing. For us to say, yeah, well, Brett, since we really can't do that, we can, however, repay you over a number of years. And Robert, I know Robert would want to be heavily involved in understanding what kind of terms, I think Mr. Widmer and Mr. Wiest and Mr. DeGolia all touched on this issue. The issue of a loan would have to take on a different sort of approach to be, I think, viable. But we'd like to know what they have in mind so that we can better advise the council on what you're all going to have to make a decision sooner or later about how this is going to eventually pay out And if it's something that could be paid out over time, you may be interested. Otherwise, it might be very difficult to do in the near future.
I would find that very interesting. But that 1.6 could be reduced even further, as you're mentioning, by the flow contributions based on Hobart Farmer Park calculations, which would be timely as part of our design phase. And then so we would actually know that, the terms as well as the number mid next year sometime, would be my guess.
Right.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is there's no material difference in October 4 and October 18 in terms of the amount of information we're gonna have, right?
Other than maybe some specific terms to what the lending opportunities might be.
That's reasonable. That's something. It's better than what I have today.
So Robert, you're in for it.
And probably a
Yeah,
confirmation
I-
of the Sequoia track, that would be, that we could do
Yeah.
very easily with GIS mapping.
Yeah, that would help, but just to be clear, I think doing the financial allocations in the design based solely on water flow isn't the right way to do it. I don't agree with it. I think we need to sit down, or, you know, the parties need to sit down and renegotiate the financial contribution before I could be comfortable to support it. I support the concept. I think it's exactly the right thing to do. I think it's very important, and I think it breaks ground. But I think doing it just based on water flow it's an arbitrary measure, and it's not one that I feel like our residents should incur. So I think it's just the right method.
FYI, they did look at other methodologies as part of the distribution, and one of them was actual land that fronts the channel and drains into the channel, and Atherton's contribution was even higher.
Yeah,
And
of
if they
course,
did by
of course.
person, how would we have done?
Per capita, we would have done probably much better.
But
Okay,
land,
so-
there's a,
But it could be a layered approach, as Councilmember Whitman was talking about.
Yeah, and I think it should be. I mean, we could have done it based on, you know, tax contributions from commercial entities, and we would have fared far, far better.
Ratio would be good for
I'm not
us.
sure that.
But I think it needs to be
Yeah.
it needs to be a more complex approach than is being proposed.
One of the issues that the county representative touched on very briefly is the Holbrook Palmer Park detention ponds. The real reason Caltrans wants to fund the money is to clean the water of pollutants,
That's right.
which, by the way, Woodside's still on the hook in a lot of ways. If we show that they're contributing to pollution and we're paying to clean it up, I think Woodside might have to, if they don't want to join, that's fine, they're still liable for what they contribute to the channel. And not just water, but
The
which-
pollutants
but the pollutants.
from the horse.
And
Well, I'm sorry, but now when you say liable, what do you mean?
there's a cost associated with the pollutants. We have an NPDES permit that's rings the bay. There's a cost to that for each and every agency, every town, every city, every district, everybody's paying into that some money. Now, if we're taking money from Caltrans and putting our money into it and putting a project in Holbrook Palmer Park that takes the upstream water only and cleans it, that doesn't impact Redwood City and the county very much at all, and parts of Menlo Park that are below the park. But it does impact everybody that's upstream from us. And it may be in their best interest to want to pay into that, for instance.
So that's where you lose me. There's a big difference between liable and it may be in their best interest to want to do it.
Maybe it is in their best interest, because if we have to go back and do a study to show that they're polluting our water and we're paying to take it out of what they're giving us, I believe they're liable for that. And I believe we can make them pay for that. We could sue them and for the amount that they're contributing and not paying for. I mean, like, I think they're just kind of sitting up there right now saying, I have a free ride because my water goes down there, it's always gone down there, and you can't stop me from sending my water down there. There's some truth to that. But they're also putting things in the water, and every time they develop, every development upstream from a project like this contributes to that pollutant. And I think that was one way the county ought to be looking at the Holbrook Palmer Park, not only as a water detection, but also as a pollutant reducing project. And there is an area where I think Councilman DeGoli is absolutely correct, that this is another way that should be looked at kind of outside the box in terms of, hey, if we're paying to clean the water that then goes downstream cleaner, we ought to get some kind of recompense for that.
Well, it's the volume also that goes through.
I did want to point this out before we leave the subject. Elizabeth pointed out the issue of volume, and the proposed, we haven't built it yet, but the proposed water capture facility would take 10 to 12 acre feet of water out. I don't know how that impacts the hydrology. If there's 10 to 12 acre feet less, and maybe there's a little bit more because some of that gets absorbed into the aquifer during the rainy season. But there's some volume of water that with this water capture facility will certainly be less going down the channel. It may be 1% more less. I don't know what the percentage is, but I think it should be looked at. Although I think the really material point is that we need to look at more than just quantity of water going into the Bayfront Canal. I don't think that's.
So what do we have specifically as we look to put shape on this and have it, come back to us on either the 4th or the 18th? It's a question. Anybody?
Well, I think we should direct staff to work with the collaborative and help us try to get us more information about alternative ways of structuring the financials.
Can I take a stab at it?
Yes.
As well? So that, have staff work together with the county staff and see if there's another way to take a stab at the formula approach, whether it's a stack formula or some other methodology to come back. And then look at the Sequoia track, see if we can get that information out as well. And then get a sense of what the full cost would be short-term and long-term, and what terms would be offered up by the county for that
Loan or
of some sort.
advance.
Yeah.
It's called a payback.
Is there anything missing on that list?
Yeah.
Well,
it
I
should-
think there should
yeah.
be some credit for
Yeah.
recent past investments and current and planned investments.
I think that could go
yeah.
toward the formulaic.
I just want to make a
Right.
point about the Marsh Road Channel, and I know that you mentioned it, Councilman Whitmer, that we invested $4 million and we should get a credit for that. The reason we rebuilt the channel was not because of water flow necessarily, it was because our wall was collapsing. It was a safety issue. The road was gonna collapse, it had nothing to do with, we made it better, we did make it better, but the driving force was safety, okay?
It didn't change the flow at all.
And it didn't change, so I just wanna make sure everybody is not.
But it's a flood control cost, and we've had, yes, it absolutely is, it's a flood control channel. And you spent money on fixing that flood control channel, and there've been other costs. I'll bet the other jurisdictions have had some costs managing their flood control.
Okay, if we can get
Okay.
credit for that, great, but I just
I'm
don't wanna be deceived.
If we can keep it moving forward, I think we've gotten, unless did you?
No, I have nothing to say.
Oh, come on,
I
Gary.
nailed it.
I have water to drink.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, what happens there?
Yes.
If
I don't.
Jordan might, so we have, I think, two different possibilities, is one to try to gather that information, come back on the 4th, the other is gather information, come back on the 18th. Do we think we'll be able to have that information by the 4th?
We can try.
We can try our best.
If not, we're going to be.
We'll do our Hail
I
Mary.
think if we can't get it, we can move it to the 18th.
Okay, does that work?
And then
Put
we'll
pressure
know
on
what Menlo Park
Put
does,
pressure on the county.
and we'll know what Redwood City does.
this is
No, you were very informative, thank you so much, and we're not grilling you, she's not it's not like she's me.
Okay, guys, hey, we're in the middle of this. Let's try to push this forward just for a moment.
None of the other members would come with me, and I didn't know why.
Hey,
Now
now
I
you did.
know.
Now you did. Okay, so is that articulated enough that somebody might want to move that as a motion?
Oh, I don't think we need
I
it.
don't need
You don't need it?
Staff
Okay,
direction.
staff, great, okay,
Our teeth are not that sharp.
Where are we?
thank you. So that would take us, I believe, to item 27, the Civic Center update.
Yeah, Mayor, this is me again. We have a recommendation, this is a Civic Center update. Actually, there's 6 parts on your staff report of a recommendation. The first one is pretty much receive and file the cost model manager and the project schedule. The bottom line, that has not changed either way since the July 19th staff report. So unless there's any questions, I'd like to move on. And if it's okay, Mayor, I'd like to take maybe one at a time of these areas, because I think there's a lot of detail with some of these that you might want to discuss instead of like keep moving. The second one is to authorize the city attorney to prepare the city manager to execute an amendment to a consulting service agreement with WRNS Studio to provide leadership in energy and environmental design, otherwise known as LEED, certification and the necessary designs and documentation for the library for a not to exceed fee of $19,050, and for the City Hall Police Building for a not to exceed fee of $74,000. And with that, I'd like to just stop on that one and just also introduce that John Schluter from WRNS is here to answer any questions that you might have about the LEED certification process and, you know, what are the pros and cons with doing that. And so, John, you want to?
John, do you want to take it or do you want to answer questions?
Comfortable either way. Thank you for the time.
Council's preference, do you want to go with questions or would you like to do something?
Answer questions is good.
Okay. Any questions?
I think we get the gist of it.
Questions on item?
LEED certification. Gary, just.
I completely understand. Thanks. Did my call.
So I have a question. I just want to confirm we could pursue with LEED certification for one of the buildings and not both.
Right.
That's correct.
And on that end, or to that same end, is LEED certification something that has to be by a specific time, or is it something that if we deferred and had some money in 5 years to do, or?
5 years is probably a little long to wait. Typically, there are submissions that happen in the design phase, and some of the points are actually activated and triggered through what we would engage during the design. During the construction of the building, there are many tasks that need to be taking place in order to ensure that we're actually going to get those credits. And so if we wanted to wait 5 years, it's difficult to hold a contractor responsible to kind of take those extra responsibilities. So 5 years is probably a little long. I think we'd have a hard time tracking back through submittals to get to that. So really, this is probably about the right time to make the decision. Sometimes we're earlier. Occasionally we might be slightly later, but I wouldn't push it too far beyond where we're at.
And then if I could, I'm sure there's a question. Does it open the door to grants? Is there any way funded stuff? You know, is there a likelihood that we get some money back for what we're putting out?
Yes. Now, in some ways, that's indirect. There's programs through PG&E and other California incentives. Savings by Design, you may have heard of, applies. Yeah.
We met them, they're gonna do it.
So those opportunities are part of what we're sort of tracking and making more transparent through the LEED process. And it gives a measurable result. So the documentation is already more or less in place for Savings by Design. Also on the solar front, as you know, we have ad alternates in the project right now for solar design. There are California solar initiatives as well, which have some funding opportunities. So there are incentives. By taking on LEED, you're actually working towards making those incentives visible to the public, or to these institutions, these utilities.
No, that's okay. So LEED does not mean net zero energy or zero net energy.
No, so they are different. They're both benchmarking systems, but you know, leadership in energy efficient design. So LEED in its basis is about energy efficiency, but it's a little more expansive in its approach, and it's a little more historical in that it's been around a little bit longer. I think both have honorable intentions, and so you know, it's hard to sort of pick and parse between the two because I think they're both doing the right thing.
So just, I think in the past, historically, LEED has kind of gotten a little bit of a bad name because developers developers have fudged or, you know, check boxes, and it's, you know, the system that you can kind of work the system and get a lead and really not be that energy efficient. So, and then there is this cost to it. Is there another metric that would be comparable that, you know, silver, platinum, gold?
Yeah. So those silver, platinum, gold, those certifications speak to the level that we would carry the project, or projects in this case. I think I want to go back to your first point, which is about fudging, right? And I think everybody can talk about green, right? It's really easy to say, oh, we're doing something sustainable, we're being responsible. LEED is a third-party system that is built upon checking and verifying that. The point system that we refer to gives a lot of flexibility for different types of projects and different environments to find ways to be successful. Every project's going to be different. The one thing, though, is the structure of those credits. People will attack it and say, well, there's arbitrary credits here. You know, why would I get 1 point for placing bike parking when it doesn't make sense in this community or in this location? So that's one where you might say, well, that's not very performative. Why hold my project to that? But the reality is that 65% of the credits are performative. So that being said, I think LEED actually does take a good measure to sort of ensure that we're getting a good performing building, something that's going to be responsible for you as an owner and an occupant, but also for a town, recognizing the funding and, you know, that this is a publicly funded project, a donor funded project.
Can you speak to how, if we pursued the LEED certification, it could open up funding and what the likelihood of getting any funding would be?
The likelihood is a difficult one.
Well, I mean, but I just don't know if it's common or uncommon or easy or hard or.
I think it activates us to be ready for those kind of conversations, because often you need to be very nimble when that funding source is found. You need to be able to speak in a sort of measured and intelligent way. With LEED, we're going to be documenting that all the way through the process, not only in the design, and we've been doing it. I mean, we've already been engaging in this through the design process. You've been a part of that with some of the discussions on the PAEC. But also, I think what's most important too is in the construction, and then following the construction, when you folks are occupying the building, and making sure that we're actually, what we've built says and does what it was supposed to do. And so having all of those steps in place is what I think enables us to be equipped for these funding sources. If we said, well, we're going to pass on it, it's an upfront cost that we didn't really want to take, that's fine. We still have sustainable measures we've designed into the project. It's just a little more difficult to ensure that we're actually getting what we've designed and getting what we paid for through construction, through submittals, through the products that we bring onto the site, through the waste that we take off of the site. All of those things that kind of enable us for a broader discussion in terms of funding.
I find that confusing. Is the LEED certification not simply a certification? So couldn't we do everything you just discussed, whether or not we applied for somebody to tell us, you know, yeah, you can have the certificate, you can handle all that?
We could, but at the same time, this is a benchmarking structure. It's a third-party verified. So that would give the responsibility of checking and the onus of that. That would be the question: is where does that lie? Is that with the town? Is it with the design team? Where is that situated?
It's subjective. It's like arm's length.
Right.
Right. Is it time sensitive right now for us to make a decision tonight?
That's a good question. I mean, selfishly, yeah.
Would love to know
Selfishly,
right now.
I mean, it would be great to know. Only in that it helps us at this point start to, you know, further push. We're kind of pushing here at 90% construction documents, so it's a good time to kind of build this into the specifications and into the design drawings. However, speaking honestly, if it didn't happen tonight, if it happened slightly later, I don't know that it's a deal breaker necessarily, but I do think given where we're at in the process, this is a pretty ideal time.
Would it be helpful or harmful to sort of split the baby and have, say, the library move forward, and then the administrative building would defer a decision on? Would that be helpful or more complicated?
Well, at least it gives us something to get started on. So helpful in that respect. And I can speak to, you know, the difference in terms of cost and how that's broken out too. I'm sure that's probably a question you have, is the library value versus the design fee associated with the Civic Center building. And a lot of that has to do, one, with the complexity of programs. We're talking about 3 distinct programs within the Civic Center, right? The council chamber, the admin building, and the police. along with some more spaces, more openings in terms of windows and doors, just more complexity in terms of scheduling, square footage, construction type, systems. I could keep going on and on. So overall, much more complicated building. With the library, we have a lot more open spaces. We have fewer systems. We have a flat roof. So to that end, the library is a little bit more simple as a building goes, and so that is something we could dive right into with that approval.
So with the Civic Center part of the project, we've got a series of ad alternates. Many of them are green building components to them. If we opt not to do those, did we waste $74,000 if we go for the LEED certification?
No, not necessarily. A lot of the credits, they do tend to be heavily weighted towards energy and system design, and we're designing a very energy efficient City Hall building. So I don't consider it wasted at all. In fact, I still think we have a very good potential score coming from the City Hall building, whether we take the renewable energy or not, and some of the other site measures that we have as alternates as well.
I just want to ask a question to the public. Any public comment on this issue? City Manager, Board Council comments?
You know, when I came in here, I thought, well, we should get LEED certification for the library, and it probably isn't that important for the admin building. But I must say, when I think about Portola Valley, whenever you talk to Portola Valley about their civic center, the first thing they talk about is a LEED certification.
They're very proud of that.
And because it's an independent acknowledgement, and especially if it's going to help us get funding sources, which I think, you know, that's something that leads. Now, will it help us get more donations? Who knows? I mean, we've had struggles getting donations as it is. But I think that having an independent party look at this is good for us. It's recognition. I mean, we're putting a lot of money. We're putting an enormous amount of effort into this building, and I think we ought to. We got an award for the Marsh Road design. We should be able to get that for this. I think it's a wonderfully designed building. So I would support it.
I go to these regional, meetings for CCAG and ABAG and all these. Redwood City is always getting all these awards for all their buildings and stuff that they're doing and everything. And South San Francisco.
Traffic.
And we're in the traffic. We don't get anything. So, I mean, I would love to do whatever we can. It's going to be a signature piece for us. It's going to be great.
One thought I have is, I by the way agree with that. I would hate to be in a situation where we're making decisions about an ad alternate and we make a decision that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $74,000. You say, actually, I would rather have done whatever that alternate is than get the LEED certification. Do you think we run the risk of putting ourselves in that position where we're committing to do LEED certification now and the result will be there's something we might refer later that we're not going to do?
The ad alternates are way more expensive.
So there's nothing in this.
Yeah,
That would make that. Thank you.
If I can, through the chair.
Please.
Different perspective. Surprise. I'm okay with saying the lead for the library, but I'm not okay with saying lead for the City Hall Police Department. We just heard, and we can defer this off and make a decision at a later date. But John said we're making a very efficient building. I mean, right now I want to get a building built. And so to me, costs are in consideration, and I know some might say it's only $74,000, but it is $74,000. So everywhere we can look at dollars and cents, we can say we have an LED library. Come visit our LED library. You don't have to visit our non-LED police station. I'm okay with that. I'll still give you a word for the library. I'm still okay with a
getting grants are very, very slim, and I think that that's been our experience. I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense for the library. I mean, the library is gonna be better than LEED certified, and I think that we ought to get that. We have raised, maybe with pledges, $6.5 million. Of that, $2.5 million are pledged but not collected yet. So we're expecting them to come in, but they have not yet. And so, I'm concerned for how much money we're spending, because we're spending now taxpayer dollars. So as I said, I think that would be, that's a nice to have later, maybe. But I can't see spending that. We said that we would be as cost effective as we could when we went to the public. And I think that having a certificate on the wall isn't doing that. And I remember one major donor saying, hey, if we're gonna be doing all this extra stuff, then we've gotta think twice about his contribution. So, I think that we need to do the right things with regards to return on investments. For some of the discussion items that we have coming up, and some of the adults that we're going to be talking about. Again, I think it's perfectly acceptable and a key thing for the library, but I'd like to keep the $74,000 and spend it for any cost elsewhere.
So what I'm hearing is there's unanimity on the library. There's a split on the civic center, the other three units. And if it's coming to me, I think my thought would be, let's move forward to meeting in the library, let's look forward to the rest of the city hall issues, the administrative building.
Let's not close the door.
But no, absolutely not close the door. I think it may well be well worth doing.
Personally, I think it's well worth doing. I think it's well worth doing now to make that commitment and to move forward. And so if we were going to have a vote, and I think you'd be the swing vote on that.
That's my sense.
Yeah.
There's a motion on this one.
Okay. It's normally not.
So I'd like to make a motion that we go forward with the LEED certification for the $19,050 for the library, and also to, at this point, do the LEED certification application for City Hall Police Building for a fee not to exceed $74,000, and if it's could be brought in less than that, I understand there's a possibility that it could be less than $74,000, that we do that. That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
That's not to defer.
It's not to defer. No.
Well, I'll second, I support that, but I'm willing to defer the admin and police building for a month. I don't think we should put ourselves in a position where we're deferring it a long time, because they're in the middle of design.
Well, that's why I want to, bring it up now, because if we just kick it down the road.
But would you accept an amendment to defer it for 1 month?
I don't see that it's going to make a big difference.
I think your difference would come in depending on where the bids come back. Which bids?
But he's saying
For the
that he
project,
needs to
whatever.
start
Not
doing
too late
it
until
now.
January
No,
or February.
yeah, and they need
But
to
they
start
need to start now.
doing it now. That's why I made the motion the way it is.
Didn't need to do it now. He would like, see,
Well,
the bobbing of the head agrees with that. Bob the head, wrong move.
John?
So just to be clear, and given the schedule too, with permit issue going on here in the near future, bid documents coming early into the next year, the decision, like I said, it would be much better to have this decision as soon as we can. I don't think it's going to take us off the train tracks if it's derailed a month, but honestly, it would, to move and get the team engaged in terms of the design and getting this structured and in place, it would be better now. Part of the reason we do that is we have checklists where we have to roll through all of the credits. We have to essentially set up where the site lot lines are for each project, whether it's one project or the 2 projects. And so there's calculations that are involved in all of the site approach, and then as we start to look at the buildings and those performances as well. And like I said, with the library building, it's a relatively simple building. That's why the fee is so much less. The City Hall building is actually the harder one, so if we had to choose, it's almost more important for us to choose the City Hall building earlier than the library in that case. thanks for the opportunity to clarify.
Okay.
You're gonna lose that one. We can defer, you won't lose it.
Well,
Well,
Call for the
I'm
motion.
happy to defer it a month,
Let's,
but
Let's have the vote.
Nay.
We got a motion in a second, so I guess we'll move forward. All right. So the motion is to, just as written here, right? Not, the library not to be 1950, and City Hall Blues Building not to exceed 74, and then vote. Now, all those in favor?
aye.
I mean, say aye, didn't I?
Aye. I heard you.
All those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay. And the reason I didn't make a motion is I just, the top of the mayor doesn't normally make the motion.
You can make a motion.
Okay, then I would move, we move forward to the library, immediately we defer the police stations, what are we calling them here, the administrative building?
City Hall PD.
City
I
Hall
think
PD for 1 month. Yeah.
1 month.
Why don't we
I'll
just,
second
I'll
that.
second.
why don't we just go forward with the library and we can bring this up? He said not 5 years, but any time, really. I realize that they prefer to have it as soon as possible, but it doesn't have to be 1 month and it doesn't have to be 2 months. It could be after we get the cost in there.
No.
That's what he said.
That's not what he
Just
said.
the reason I'm throwing it in a month is we could again decide to defer it a month if we chose, but at least this will give us a little time to.
I'll second that.
Yeah. So all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Well, that passes.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
number 2.
Okay,
Number three.
number 3, Mayor, actually 3, 4, 5, and 6 are just have council provide staff with direction. And number 3 is about solar polar potential power purchase agreement, PPA. Staff is requesting direction on whether to move forward with solar as an add alternate with or without confirmation of a PPA. At this time, as the council knows, the PV panels for the Civic Center and not the library are add alternates. And at the time of bid, the council will get a cost for incorporation into the project. Staff will also need to explore the potential for a power purchase agreement. These two items are related. In short, the town could choose to implement solar as an all-add alternate with the understanding that the cost therein would be borne to some degree under a power purchase agreement, and that there may be future revenue-generating opportunities with
I'm
that.
sorry, Mark, can I interrupt for one moment? Would it be cleaner to do the corporate yard, is that kind of a separate issue, or are they all tied together?
They're all separate.
They're all separate. You can pick which ones you'd like to do first.
So,
We do have audience members
yeah,
for 73 Ashford.
Yeah.
but I was,
Let's do that
so,
first.
so can I just make a suggestion about the, item number, about the solar, item number 3?
Well, can we,
I would like to, I would like to have more information on power purchase agreements and what all that means and how it's structured and things like that. And could we put it in a study sessions with a consultant, and is this a time-sensitive issue?
Let's agree, by the way, agreed on had that conversation, city manager. As Rick's pointed out properly, we do have members of the public here for one of these items, so why don't we give them the courtesy of dealing with that issue, and then
Well,
we'll knock
okay.
out the rest of it.
I just thought that would be,
An easy way to deal with it.
Okay, so,
Okay, then,
Bob?
that'll be moving to number 5, Mayor. And that is regarding the property line with the town property and 73 Ashfield Road property line.
yeah.
It was through the Alta survey that council approved and authorized staff to perform earlier this year that staff became aware of the existing fence line discrepancy along the property line with 73 Ashfield Road. The current fence line does not sit on the property line, and the actual town property extends another 19.5 feet west of the fence line to approximately the line of the redwood trees. The adjacent property owner at 73 Ashfield Road, who's here today, Dr. Michelle Green Olson, has been advised of the property line issue and is understandably concerned that given that she has been using the space as quasi-private property and maintaining those redwood trees for the last 15 years. Dr. Olson has expressed interest to continue use of the town's property. However, the issue is different than the right-of-way, as the town is not technically underlying owner of the right-of-way. However, in this case, the town is the underlying owner of that property, and there's liability issues associated with that. So in other words, if the neighbor were to trip and fall on the property, or one of the trees were to fall, the town could be held ultimately liable. While the town does not actually need the space at this time for anything other than fencing and landscaping with the Civic Center project, the liability remains on the town side. Because of this, staff does not recommend that the town allow the adjacent property owner continued use of the property. While the council could issue the property owner a revocable license for use of the area portions there, or therefore sell property to them, staff does not recommend these options. Staff recommends that the town reclaim its property and develop it according to the approved Civic Center plans. With that, that concludes my presentation. Again, Dr. Olson is here to speak to the council on this matter.
Thank you. This is my fiance, Art Elola, with moral support. So I just want to say that I do appreciate your time and allowing me to speak about the Town Center project. It's a project that I have supported. When we heard about it, I knew it was going to be hard on us as a family right up against the project, but it overall seemed good for the town. I was supportive of it. Since it has passed, we've had a few surprises, the wall being one, and some tree issues being the other. So I did prepare a few things, so I have a copy for y'all in case I get emotional. Help with that. So just some, background history. I bought the home right across the street about 15 years ago, and it's just a beautiful yard. If you came back there, you see this beautiful line of redwood trees. So when I moved in, I found that there was this line of redwood trees that had been planted by the city about 55 years ago. And then there's this wall of trees, and then there's a gap, and then there's this wall that the town had built, or a wall that the town had built. It didn't follow the property line, apparently. It kind of left, it was built leaving the trees and land on my side of the wall, which seemed odd to me now in retrospect. So we just treated that as part of our property and maintained it, as you said. In the 15 years that I have lived there, the town has never approached me or discussed ownership of the trees. When I bought the home, no one said anything about this land. I, in Plainview, took care of the trees and had them cabled when that was advised by the tree maintenance service to protect them and their health. With this current issue, with the Town Project Center, moving forward and these surveys showing where the property line is and the discrepancy between that and the wall, my concerns are obviously that right now, as you stand in my window and I'm doing the dishes and I look out, I see these redwood trees, and after this wall is built, I'll look out and see a wall right there. Not as ideal. So my preference obviously would be to keep the fence in its current position, and I would just continue taking care of the trees at my own expense. The land could remain the property of the town, but perhaps an official easement. I know the town's concerns are the liability, since as Marty has said, the town isn't really there's not really a developable area between all these trees, but the liability issue to me is the same whether it's on wherever the fence is, you're liable for your land. So if the fence is here or there, if someone trips and falls on this tree, whether in my backyard or in the parking lot, you're liable apparently. I think there's a lot less traffic in my yard than there would be in a public park or public parking lot. So I think your potential liability issues is actually decreased with the trees on my side of the land. The other potential solutions that we thought about were, leaving it in place, moving the wall closer to the property line, but leaving a little bit of space between the trees and the wall. These trees are huge. I measured one and it was 121.5 inches around, which is over 10 feet around, and the root structures are all over the place. And I think if you try to put a fence too close, you're gonna have a very wobbly lifting up fence. And I also don't want to see anything that harms the trees. I did a lot of reading about the town's policies on, town's policies on tree preservation and protective zones and all that. And so I know how Atherton feels about these heritage trees, and they are very well protected. And if it wasn't a city, of course, or the town doing the building, there'd be a 121-foot buffer zone around these trees because of their size. But I know that that's not reasonable, but I do hope that just some kind of practicality of taking into consideration where this wall and fence would be, and not encroaching on the root structures or anything that's going to damage these really beautiful trees. The third option that Marty had presented was putting a fence that kind of really follows the property line, so that would be going kind of right between the trees, so it'd have to kind of go and then go around a tree and go around a tree. That's definitely an option. I think, again, with trees of the size and the roots as they are, even when the fence is pretty far away, it tends to be affected by the roots over time. So I think putting it right up against, there's going to be a lot of replacing of that fence. The other concern, which is similar, was because it concerns trees, I was told twice that the two large trees between my front yard and the police station would be removed, and that is, you know, a real problem for me. So I asked the town to protect those trees. I took pictures of them and measured them just so you have an idea of where they are and how they look. They provide a lot of buffer from the whole town center area. They just noise buffer, but also just, you don't, you know, look right out and see this big blank area and then train tracks or cars and police cars. It's just aesthetically, it's really nice, but also there's a lot of, it just feels like a protective layer too, because there's trunks of big trees. Right now, traffic is going into the police station parking lot or going down Ashfield, so it's not really heading towards our home. But we've been told that the road is going to be a little bit more towards our home now, and I really don't want cars coming straight up my front yard with nothing but a redwood fence, you know, keeping them from rolling over my kids and us. So I would prefer, at least the trees prevent some stoppage of that. Just in conclusion, I do know that, you know, this is one home and one resident, and you have to think about the whole town. But for the town, this is a very small area of pretty much unusable land, and for us, it's huge. It depicts how, again, we live our lives and look at our trees, and we take good care of them, and how we use our yard and our privacy. With this town center, and I wrote on here, you know, we're looking at years of construction and noise and dust and, you know, lot's gonna be going on. And then at the end of which, when everyone else in Atherton is like, it's done, we have this great town center, we're gonna have, you know, a wall in front of our window and an open space in front of our front yard. So I really hope that you will consider, you know, doing something practical with the tree line in the back and really not taking out those trees in the front, especially if the road isn't going to go right in that area, because there's a big high voltage thing there. So I don't think the road can go too close to these trees. So I'm hoping that they don't really have to be removed, and then later say, oh, I guess we could have kept them, and, you know, start planting a seedling. So did you want to say, and I appreciate you giving us a chance to speak, because I know you guys had a long agenda, but did you want to say something too?
No, you did great. We're just trying to get caught up too. We were kind of behind the ball. We came to the presentation, and at that time, we didn't realize the plans had changed so that there would be a road. We have a police station now, feel very safe, and now it's turned into a parking lot / road or thoroughway. So that was a little bit of a surprise, and then we were kind of under the impression that they really sold it. Any trees along those border lines were going to be saved, and so not only were we surprised about our property line being so close, but now these trees in front of our house that are buffering us. So that's we continue to feel like we're getting surprised a bit. So we're just trying to get caught up and understand some direction. And part of it was we weren't doing our homework as much, but now we really want to get ahead of the game and understand, you know, what's going to happen with regard to our property line and those trees that we really value.
Sure. Thank you. Maybe have questions.
I think it's really a question for staff. You know, this is a little bit different. It looks like tree. They're not as thick as the other row on the other side. So as far as the thinning out of this particular area, is there any issues related to it being too thick, or are they spaced reasonably well?
The ones that are actually in the town property, or the ones that are on her side of the fence right now, there's no spacing issues that I'm aware of. They're healthy trees. As the doctor said, she's been maintaining those trees over the last 15 years. I think one of the trees they're referring to are closer to the road. And there's a redwood out there, and then there's I think some other oak trees that are smaller in size, but because the road's going to be turning around there, those will have to remove. The redwood, though, that's on the borderline, and as I mentioned when I met with them on September 6th, when we're out during construction, we're going to try and save every tree we can, and that'll be a case-by-case basis from there when we're out there. And at this point, I can't say, that the consultants are saying it should be removed, but I'm not convinced of that because the road can be maybe tweaked a little bit to accommodate that.
Mr. Devine?
Yeah, are the trees planted on the property line, or is the property line on their side of the trees or on our side of the trees? What?
Looks like it goes right down the middle of the tree.
Well, I think we have the survey on the road, but we don't know exactly straight if the line goes all the way through because our surveyors didn't go on the property. But right now, it looks like the property line is actually, I guess, just east of those big redwood trees, and the redwood trees are on her property.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. That's good news.
So she would get to keep the trees.
So-
It's just, where's the fence go?
I think it's the
opposite way.
Is that? No.
Yeah, no, but
Okay.
opposite, half.
It's the opposite.
As you're looking at the property, the line of trees, I think the property line is to the left of the tree.
Yeah.
Is that what you?
It kinda hits the
There's
base-
two kind of
the
lines.
base
The
of
ones
it.
that are, yeah.
You
So
would
it's kind of-
probably catch some of those trees
Oh, that's right, yeah.
beyond the root
And then
structure.
the
Right,
other,
yeah.
the other one's
I
further
was-
down
I
towards
was
the back of the
incorrect,
lot,
you're
or on
right.
our side. So-
Now, there's two
Yeah.
there's
The
two
prop-
issues. There's the trees on the property line, which are
Yeah.
kind of ours because that property line hits those trees or
Yeah,
right at
at
the
least
base
part of the
them.
trees.
And then there's the trees in the front
Which
that
are
are
yours.
the city trees. So we're
Okay,
clear.
have we done a survey?
Yes.
So why don't we know the answers?
We agree.
Yeah. So I was incorrect, Mayor. The trees are on the town's property, the redwood trees.
And how much beyond the trees is this kind of?
Probably 2 or 3 feet. I mean, we'd have to actually go out there and measure them more closely.
With 2 or 3 feet, we should know within an inch. Exactly.
Well, we have the boundaries on the outside. Yeah, we have that drawing. There's the diagram. It's on your attachment in your report.
Yeah.
And what the surveyors did, they took the boundary lines on the street and they took them in the back. But I don't believe, unless they did this, went on your property to do the survey, right? So I think they just did a straight line through, right?
So they didn't have a down on the other side to direct the line directly, so we really aren't sure if they're.
Well, I think they did have the boundary on the other side too, right? So they just connected the dots pretty much.
So again, so just to clarify, we do have an accurate survey that we are
Correct.
confident in is precise.
100% confident, right?
Okay. Mr. Wizard?
99.
So, I got 3 or 4 questions. So, the city manager indicated to me that, I guess at the time you bought your property, there was a discussion on where is the real boundary, and there was a discussion that wasn't necessarily your property, but the real estate agent did not know whether or not there was an easement or not. Is that correct, or is that?
I was told there was an easement, and then
Okay.
everything I read about easement said, again, that if you had the property for 5 years in plain view and you've been taking care of it. So I wasn't really thinking that it was different for a town. So I thought, well, it's just this permanent easement that we would just
So
take care of.
was there a title search done?
No, not that I know of.
Before normally before you close, you have a title search done, and it says whether or not you have. So the next question, there's a shed on the property that's 2 feet from the fence.
Mhm.
Did that get permitted?
No, it's a removable shed.
Well, they're supposed to be permanent if it's a permanent structure that's within 2 feet, it's supposed to be a number of feet off the fence. So
10
again,
foot.
that would have been clear that might have been a problem. Last question, I guess, for Marty or city manager. Is it possible to put a fence and have the posts or the set fence even move a little bit so that there wouldn't be the post down and damage the roots, because the redwood trees have shallow roots, obviously, and we wouldn't want to damage those.
Yeah, in fact, I had discussions with Sally Bentz, our arborist, and we're proposing an 8-foot redwood fence. And she said we could space it to accommodate the root structure of those redwood trees. So it would be a wider, then usually it's every 10 foot you put a post. I think we'd have to do that a little bit wider to accommodate that, the root structures. But as I mentioned to the doctor, you know, whatever council decides tonight, we'll work with them and the arborist to make sure we put the safety of those trees, you know, at the top priority.
So given the concern, because I did hear also in the discussion that there was some concern with just the redwood fence, you know, wouldn't it be appropriate, given the misunderstanding, should we choose to move the fence, that the homeowner would be consulted and participate in just the selection of what type of fence would be adequate for her to be looking at when she was normally looking at something different?
Yeah, that's up to council direction, absolutely.
Okay, so that's an option that we could also do
Correct.
as well, because we'd like to end this on an amicable basis, no
Right.
matter how it ends up. Right?
Exactly.
So in this picture,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like you have a hedge in front of the.
Yes.
Okay, so you currently have like
That-
a hedge in front of the redwoods.
This is our front yard.
Front yard, so there's two separate issues.
So
and I
that's
think
the
that's
Oh,
where,
That's your front yard.
if we could just address the property line issue first.
Right, that's, I was
Oh,
thinking
okay,
that
yeah.
that was the
No,
property
so
line.
right now there's, if you look out the window, there's the property line, and then there's really nothing except our shed, and then the wall.
Basically, that hedge is the property line. That's
That's
that
what
in the
we
middle of
thought.
that hedge. That property line runs through the middle of that hedge.
Well, there's a
This is
line
the-
in the
this is
street
the
looking
front-
like.
This is
That's
the
our front
front.
yard, yeah.
Now,
This
it
doesn't go perpendicular.
no,
No.
it doesn't. It stops, and then and that's my question. The earlier pictures show the bigger trees in the backyard. If you
Yeah.
look, and if you have a
I only
picture
have
there, there's a large tree, and that's what we're talking about in the backyard.
Yeah, they're huge. They're like 121 to 10 feet.
Finish this. I gotta get.
That's the last page, C2, correct?
That's the front yard, looking at where those two city trees are.
It's the side of
Yes,
the
front yard.
It's not the front of their.
Okay. Do we
It's
have
like-
one of the backyard?
Just the one tree, the 121-inch tree. It's the really big tree.
Okay, we only have a close-up of the trees in the backyard that are on the property. Now, can I ask council that we have this survey, so if I went back and I find the stake of the property line that's on the hedge and I take it to the backyard, there is no way that you could build a fence without being on our property because it's on the base of the trees. It hits if this is the tree, the property line kind of hits the edge of the trees, these massive trees.
Could we just possibly, I heard Marty say just the opposite.
Yes, and that's what I want clarification of.
That our survey shows we could construct a fence, not on their property lines and not damaging the tree, but on the other side of the tree.
Right, we can have some flexibility with that, right. The trees will be on the town property, and then depending on what kind of fence you want to put up there, working with the neighbors here, we can put the fence so that the trees will be fine, and and to space them accordingly. It might not be actually then right on the property.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. We could put a fence
Yes.
between the trees.
It would be a continuous fence, or
Wait.
would it stop?
I'm not seeing this, and I'm on the property of my own,
And I'm
so,
sorry, but
yeah.
let's.
Can we clarify this, or this?
I guess it might be what is clarified. I mean, we can talk.
But-
There's a difference, because you're saying that the property line goes through the trees, and Marty's saying the property line's 2 to 3 feet west.
Oh.
Which I
I
just,
don't think you're saying that, are you?
It depends on which tree, actually, because they have the picture right here, right?
Yeah.
What the surveyors did is they stood at the front property line and then they drew a straight line to
Well,
the
then,
back property
time out.
line.
I'm sorry. I've asked this question like 5 times, and I've gotten the answer from Marty, 100% confident
Yes.
that we have an accurate survey, we know where the property
Yeah.
line is, we know how it relates to the tree. We either do or we don't. I mean, do we
We
actually?
do have an accurate survey. right?
So we know, so why is there, why can there be confusion?
can
It's,
they,
I guess the
Yeah,
So, I think we have a little bit of a problem. They haven't been on the property.
Right.
So there's been a point assessment.
right.
Maybe it would be appropriate to have the opportunity to go one step further for points of clarity here. Not that I disagree with either side, but as points of clarity, with permission, walking on the parcel and saying, hey, this is, and we can make a better assessment of what what we need to make a decision on, if we actually understand that our surveyor actually walked the line and delineated.
We would
And
allow
actually-
you to spray paint a line for our,
and
for
mark
our
the line out.
purposes. Go ahead, let us know.
That's the missing piece right now.
I get it, but we're still encroaching on it.
I'm sorry, Marty, what's your response?
I was gonna say we'd have the surveyor go out there and actually walk the property like Art said.
Put a line in for us,
Yeah,
please.
actually mark the line out exactly where the property line is. Because when we're on their property, we're speculating where that line is. We know where it is on the street and in the back. Because it's
And the survey shows,
right,
but
Survey says.
what's on paper and what's in the land, people are walking
right.
one step this way, one step that way.
We get pretty accurate, you know, from where they drew the line on the hedge and we line it up.
Well, but you
Go
don't
ahead,
have
go
clear
ahead.
line of sight. Maybe you don't have clear line of sight from the street.
Yeah, let's,
Through the chair, in the interest of time, can we move one step forward? I know it's gonna sound like, but I do think that more informed, having a surveyor,
Thank
if
you.
it is
Thank you.
right to line,
Yeah.
we'll have a better idea in 30 days, 60 days, what do we?
Is there anything else you might want?
Why don't we walk it at the study session?
Well, I would wanna have it surveyed.
I would wanna make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, we've walked it a lot of times and you can't really tell.
I am all about the surveyor.
The survey has to go out there.
there's something wrong here. So let's nail it down.
Thank you.
And
That's
like,
that's
you
what
guys
it is.
don't, you would not object somebody walking back.
Absolutely, and we would really appreciate a line.
Seeing
Go
ourselves.
ahead and put that line there so we can,
And then,
That was a great idea.
okay.
I thought it all myself.
All right, and then just the second part is those trees in the front, which are city trees, and they're just, but so important to our well-being in our front yard, and that's where the detailed pictures are. We should have had more detailed pictures of the backyard,
We'll
but,
look at that too.
okay, all right, we
Because,
appreciate
Yeah,
that.
you can see it, it's
We
right,
don't want
right
to
there.
willy-nilly.
No.
Yeah, and just we've, it seems like that they made a commitment to try to keep those trees when we were presented
We'll
and.
say we're
Except our next issue, we're gonna be cutting down some trees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, we
That was thin,
understand
that was more
that,
of a thinning.
we understand that some stuff
I think we've got clarity.
Okay.
Motion of some sort?
No, so the clarity is we will have a professional survey,
correct.
walk the property, delineate exactly on the ground where that property line runs, and bring a sketch or something back for the council to review at a future meeting.
With this little survey,
If they're actually putting it straight on the ground, I'd love to see that.
Yes,
picture of
that
would be
and
great.
yes.
See the two feet behind the trees versus the middle of the tree.
Right.
Marking on the ground would be wonderful, yes.
Right.
That
Yeah,
sounds like.
yeah.
We'll bring that, I'm not sure if we'll get it in October, depending on the surveys.
However long it
well,
takes.
tell them it's an emergency,
Right.
Can,
you know?
on that marking on the ground, can they somehow identify that distance from there to the house? Would that be one added thing we can get on that
Well,
marking?
I think once they have a line, you can measure.
Okay, all right, as long as
Yeah,
we'll
once
bring
you
it,
see the
okay,
fluorescent
we could
paint.
bring in, as long as you trust our measurement, we'll be
Take
fine with
pictures.
that.
That sounds good.
Okay, is
Okay.
that sufficient? Okay.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank
that's
you,
good.
thank you.
Marty?
Thank you very much for your visit.
Thank you.
So Mayor, do you want to get back to the solar power purchase agreement, or you want to move on to the trees behind the library, or the corporation yard?
Let's go back up to 30. Let's go to the power purchase agreement.
Okay.
I think that before you say anything, that Councilmember Lewis had an idea about how to proceed on the power purchase agreement
Yeah, I mean,
issue. Would you like to make that?
I just think we need more information. I'd love to have an expert come and explain to us how that would work before I make any more decisions. And I don't think it is a time-sensitive deal right now. I think it's part of the package of issues that staff would like to have direction on, but I would like to direct staff to provide us with some more education.
What would be the schedule for you to talk about that in a study session?
It wouldn't be October. That one's already pretty full. It would probably be November or December.
Does that work?
You don't need to know it before then, right?
Yeah, no, it's not,
Okay.
I mean, I asked him that today.
Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. Marty?
If that's
Now
okay.
we're,
Then we're on number 4, Mayor, and that's to provide direction about the corporation yard, and staff is looking for direction about whether we should pull out the renovation of the corporation yard project out of the civic center project. Right now, MAC 5 is estimating it will cost about $1.4 million to renovate that 2,100 square foot shed back there. Staff believes we can do it for a lot less and a lot faster. And so we'd like to have the opportunity, if council so says, and everything else would stay the same, all the site work, everything would be part of the Civic Center project. We're just talking about doing some improvements in the building in the back there.
We got it. Any questions to Marty on this issue?
I think it's good. Good idea.
Is it the sense of council? Good idea?
We already agreed to this.
That's a good idea.
No.
Let's move on. I think that's sufficient. If you agree to it now, so let's take it to the next one, Marty.
Okay, then the final one is number 6, Mayor, and that is, and in this past month, in August, WNS provided some updated plans indicating which existing trees within the Civic Center project are proposed by SWA Consultants to be either left in place, protected, transplanted, or removed and salvaged. And when they say salvage, that means cut the trees in such lengths that they could be sold for the wood parts, pieces of that. Since these plans had so much detail, I incorporated in your package the attachment, a blow-up, only looking at the property along behind the library at 81 Maple Street. And those are showing the H is for heritage, the trees back there, and they're primarily all redwood trees along that fence line. The consultants recommended, I believe it was something like 9 of those trees be removed or salvaged. And after conferring with the town arborist Sally Bentz and Public Works Supervisor Steve Tyler, who's also an arborist, they're recommending actually 5, and 4 are considered runts or are smaller trees, redwoods, and 1, number 37, is actually already died or is dead. So we met with the mayors, the neighbors next door, the Goodmans, Karen and Dwell, and we talked to them about that, and they were very receptive and agreed with our recommendation, and that's what we have in front of you today to recommend that we remove the 4 little trees that would help provide a better growing environment for the other adjacent redwood trees, and then take out the 1 dead one. And if the council agrees, the city crews or contract crews could have that done by the end of the year, and that'd be prior, of course, before the Civic Center project.
Okay. Any questions on
I
this?
do. Marty, I cannot tell which ones you're talking about on this little line.
It's the ones with the X's,
It's the
Councilman?
ones with the X's.
Right.
Page 29, 28.
And in the staff report, I have identified the numbers. Yeah, there's 5. So it's,
There's S's and X's. S's and X's are different, just for the record.
Oh, well,
Okay.
and
So-
I agree.
From my perspective, I think if the neighbors are fine and the town is fine.
Yeah.
Anybody, other issues?
I have a question.
Please.
If we take them down so that we can salvage them, then how is that handled? Does the contractor actually give us a discount after he
I
sells
believe that's something that I'll talk to Steve Tyler about, because again, that city has their own contracting crew with doing tree services, and I'm not exactly sure how that would work with this, but we can certainly look and see if they can salvage the wood and get money for it, then we should get benefit for that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, that's a great idea.
There's a place over in Newark that does rough sawn.
Right. Yeah, and if we can do that to save money, we'll definitely do that.
Maybe make some benches and put it in the Civic Center.
We,
Better cost.
is the sense of the council, we're okay with this, Rick? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. The staff report made a distinction between the trees that SWA recommended
Correct.
and the subset of those trees that's referenced in the next paragraph. And I'm not sure which were removed.
Or the subset, it's a smaller number, it's the H12, 15, 27, 28, 37.
37.
Right. And 37, just so you know, is already pretty much dead.
I got that.
12, 15, 27, 28.
Right, and they're actually, I have them marked back there, if you take a look at that, they actually have slips on them already.
Are we good?
Yeah.
We're great. Marty's that finish up?
Yeah.
We're great. Can we look at 23 now? Good.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm out of here.
Your sanitary report English is not on.
Chief,
Marty was gonna handle that, so I don't know why you're taking off.
Well, let me do that one too.
See you, good job.
Let's go. All right, let's drive it.
Here I am, Mayor. We gonna wait for,
No, we don't wait for us.
Pleasure of the council, I'm waiting for Elizabeth, but
Go ahead, dive in.
if there's no controversy, you could just do
Zero.
a staff recommendation.
Well, it's
Chief.
so our recommendation is to approve the letter of response to the judge on the decision of the grand jury, and I believe it's either done or in the works for us to put a translate button on our website, to accommodate this, and we're also doing an internal review of those documents in the police department that we would primarily target for, Spanish.
I move that we approve.
second. Well, I think we should give Elizabeth the opportunity to vote.
You can vote, so well, let's take 24.
Yeah, let's move on to the next item, and then we'll come back to vote if that fits. Okay, let's look, I'm just, someday you'll want the same courtesy. So let's then move to the next item, which is the grand jury report, on privacy versus protection.
And this one was a little more in depth, obviously, as it affects law enforcement transparency with surveillance equipment. And the Chiefs Association with the sheriff in the county, very organized and took at this as a group approach. So we weren't spinning off and doing different things, and came up with the responses that you see. The concurrence was acceptance of the grand jury's recommendations, except for the one where they were asking us to go to council to get approval to utilize certain equipment for surveillance. Obviously, that can encumber a criminal investigation, which I don't anticipate to have in Atherton, or use surveillance equipment. As you may be aware, we don't have surveillance equipment. We will be getting it with the automated license plate reader equipment on the 2 patrol cars that are coming in. We already have policies in place and procedures for that. The only other equipment would be cameras in the park, which really aren't for surveillance, or our body cameras, or if there was a need for surveillance equipment, we have resources from other agencies for that. But again, it could be a sensitive use. But other than that, the grand jury's advice was accepted. We already have processes in place, and we'll be updating our policies and procedures to comply by the end of the year, which was the deadline.
Mr. Wizard?
Yeah, so, the way I read the grand jury is not necessarily we have internal processes, but that we publicly review and approve those. So I assume that when you say they'll be in place by December, they'll be on a future agenda item.
Well, and some internal for our Lexipol policy and procedures to cover that. And also too, when it talked about, public awareness of what we're buying, we're already doing that when we come before you, and it's on an agenda item, so it's out there for the
So
public.
it's gonna be on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to perfect.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I actually am concerned about the civil liberties aspect of this stuff, and I'm not sure I understand fully what NICRIC does with this information, but I worked in the Department of Justice long enough to know that when you give away assets and you get information back, you do something with it. So I will have questions likely.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so which order shall we, well, this one, we deferred.
You want to close this one?
Alright, Franny, let's stick on 24 then. Any motion on, do we need a motion?
Yes.
Any motion on, item 24?
So moved.